Anybody here not attended either one of the three parts? Part 1, 2, and 3? Everybody's attended at least one, maybe all? All? Good, 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 good. All right, awesome. Online, everybody's attended at least 1 or 2 or 3 of parts. Maybe I should say, has anybody not attended at least one? All right. So again, this session is all about the actual exam prep. And we're not going to be necessarily going through all the regular kind of course material. This is all about helping you prepare to actually write the exam. All right? Just so everybody is aware. So first of all, my name is JP. I'm a senior technical instructor with AWS. I've been an instructor for about 5 years now. Worked directly for AWS for 2. Actually just celebrated my 2-year anniversary, as we call it. Now, it's a little bit cheesy, but hey. And I teach about 40 different courses. And so I teach a lot of different courses. This is actually my first time here. It's kind of fun. It's a pretty neat place. I'm glad that you guys could come all in person. It is pretty fun. If you haven't had a chance to go, explore out the main area, it is pretty neat. So, my breaks afterwards, feel free to do so. For those of you online, you're missing out, man. I don't know why you're not here. You should be here. Pretty fun. Who knows where you're from, right? So you could be coming from. All right. Again, for those of you that joined us here in person, can you just make sure that you signed in, please? So if you didn't, you wouldn't mind passing that around. I know the majority of you have, but we just need to make sure that we take attendance, get the recognition that you deserve, right? All right. So just as a note, somebody mentioned here online as well, these microphones that are right above you are fairly sensitive. I know everybody's just kind of getting settled, but just keep in mind that they do have a tendency to capture a lot of online noise as well. Yeah, so Bernice, we will we'll do our best. All right. So again, this is the exam prep for the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam, right? Basically the first kind of level when we're talking about getting your, on your way to your certification path, right? It is a foundational certification. Now, you guys are all here. Y'all are all here. I shouldn't be these, you guys, right? Try not to, but it's so ingrained in me. Which means to me that you're all planning on taking the exam, correct?
Yes.
Is anybody here that actually wants to pass the exam, or are you just going to take the exam?
No, that's one pass.
I want to pass the exam, right? Not just take the exam. Okay, good, good. That's what I want to hear. Yeah, you actually want to pass it. That's good. Awesome. Now, I'm going to say this right off the bat. This is not that difficult of an exam. However, I understand that a lot of you may not be technical at all. That's perfectly fine. If you have a hard time with the exam when you do take it and you don't pass it, don't be like me and almost cry when you fail. I didn't fail Cloud Practitioner, but because I didn't actually take it first. The first exam that I took was the SysOps exam way back when I first started. And I think I failed by 1 or 2 questions. And I felt so bad, and I literally almost cried. I went into my car, and I remember sitting in my car, and I I didn't even want to call my wife because she messaged me, how'd it go? And I'm like, but anyway, it's not the end of the world, right? You can always retake it. I actually, the way that I put it, in a way, I'm glad I failed the first time around because it taught me, first of all, it kind of knocked me down a peg or two, right? But it actually taught me how to study. And I thought, okay, I guess I actually have to study because at the time when I took it, I had been in IT for over 20 years and I really thought that I knew it all. I studied a little bit and I thought I'd be fine, but no, I wasn't. So once you get up to the associate levels, like that one, it is a little bit more difficult, right? The cloud practitioner, not too bad. But again, I don't want you to be upset if you don't happen to pass it. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. It's really about trying until you get it kind of idea, that perseverance kind of idea. I think it shows more actually if you can do that, right? So like I said, this is what we're learning today is exam prep, right? With this size of a class, I'm not necessarily, ask everybody to introduce themselves. But again, I know we all come from varied backgrounds. Some of you do have tech backgrounds. Some of you don't have tech backgrounds at all, right? Perfectly fine. That's why we're here today, is to kind of get everybody on the same page and help you not only take the exam, but to actually pass the exam. Right? That is our goal today. All right? So, sorry, I just thought I heard. Never mind. Like I said, we're at the Skills Center here. For those of you that are online, you can come here if you're close, or Seattle, or Cape Town, right? I'd love to go to Cape Town. By the way, we have Elvira is online as well. She's another instructor. She is assisting me today with the online questions because we're expecting quite a few people, right? So Elvira, thank you very much for joining. Appreciate that. She's going to help keep me in check as well. So I always need somebody to watch over me to make sure that I don't trip over my words. Well, but yeah, I don't know, Elvira, any chance that I can go down to Cape Town and do this? If I do a good enough job here, I don't know. Maybe you can help me out. But I'd love to go to South Africa, that's for sure. But yeah, just going to talk about the skill there a little bit more as well. Lots of stuff that you can do here, right? Lots of training sessions. You guys are obviously here for that. I honestly think this is an amazing thing to be able to have for you guys to be able to come here and take these free courses. That's pretty awesome. I only heard about this place, fairly recently. So I didn't even know this existed. I've been with AWS for a couple of months. All right. Here's what we're actually going to be talking about in a few hours. We, first of all, are going to help you kind of assess your actual readiness for the exam itself. And so at least give you an idea of where you're at, right? And then help you to be able to actually structure your studies. What you really need to understand first is where you're at, right? There might be some areas where you are really strong in, and you don't need to actually waste your time studying those topics. Maybe just kind of double checking to make sure you're up to speed with those. You want to spend the majority of your time, obviously, on the stuff that you're struggling with, right? So we're going to help you kind of assess where you're at so that can help you actually plan your study time, okay? To make sure that you are using it as efficiently as possible. But first, we actually want to talk about the exam as well, right? So with this code, you can get access to the actual exam guide, right? This is something now that, I mean, you can follow along if you want to right now. There's a QR code there. If you want to scan that, or the actual link as well, if you want to do that. All right. The certification itself, again, kind of helps you along your journey, right? Like I say, this is a foundational certification. You don't have to take it before you take the other certifications, but if you are brand new to AWS and brand new to the tech field, I definitely recommend it. Again, you guys are here, so it's great, right? So we will be using a few different techniques. I'm not actually using Slido, all right, for this, just in case. We are just going to be going through questions that we're going to be talking about. Right? So the idea is when you're studying for these exams, again, you want to focus a lot on concepts that are a little bit more difficult to remember. We will also help you to kind of reinforce some general task concepts. And then we're going to actually go through some questions, right? So you really get a sense of the type of questions that you're going to see in the exam and give you tips, bless you, give you some tips and tricks to help you actually answer the questions correctly. So if you look at the actual exam itself, again, this is a foundational level exam. So it's going to be a fairly high level of understanding of the cloud, the services, the terminology. Okay. The exam is 90 minutes in length. 65 questions. 60. All the questions. Sorry, was that a question online?
Q&A call.
Oh, somebody must have been unmuted. Yeah, it sounded like me. It is 65 questions in length. They're all either multiple choice or multiple response. Okay, so it's not like you have to write a 5,000 word essay or anything like that. But you may have heard that some other vendors have, some of their exams have like labs where you actually have to do stuff, right? I know Microsoft is really popular with that kind of stuff. You don't with these exams. And actually none of the exams you need to do that. They're all multiple choice or multiple response. One thing I will say about the multiple response questions, I'm thinking of it right off the bat, is that if it says choose 2 correct answers, make sure you choose 2. It's not going to tell you if you only choose 1, right? It won't allow you to choose more, but it also won't tell you if you only choose 1. Also, don't assume that it just wants you to choose 2. It's possible it wants you to choose 3, right? Make sure you read the question, right? I can't tell you how many times people get in trouble not actually reading the question. Take your time, read the question, do exactly what it says, all right? It is $100 to take it, US dollars. So me being Canadian, that's like, I don't know, like $5,000 or something Canadian. Pretty expensive. You can either do it online or you can do it in a testing center, right? A lot of people say, oh, I'll do it online, it's a lot easier because nobody's watching me. Well, it is proctored online, right? So you have somebody that's watching you, right, on video and audio. They will check your desk area. They will check to make sure that nobody else is in the room. You can't talk. You can't get up and go to the bathroom. You can't really do much but answer the questions, right? I have a tendency to lean, I don't know if anybody can see, I have a tendency to lean on my desk, right, when I'm reading questions. And I'll cover my mouth, not intentionally. I get warned for that. Can you please remove your hand from your mouth? I also have a tendency to read the questions out loud or think out loud. please, no talking, you know. I've never actually been kicked out of an exam, but they can. They can just stop the exam, right? Right there and then. They think that you're cheating anyway. Somebody walks into the room, they can stop the exam, right? During COVID times, we didn't have a choice but to take exams online. And I heard a lot of stories about people that were trying to find a place in their house that was quiet. They knew they wouldn't be disturbed. People were talking about doing the exams in their bathroom at home, right? Because they knew that was the only place that their family would leave them alone. Hopefully you don't have to do that. But again, the idea is that you want to make sure that you're not disturbed. So I tell my family, when I'm taking the exam, I'm going in the bedroom or wherever I'm going, the door is closed. Please do not do anything until I open the door, right? Because it can be an issue. I love because even though my family doesn't bother me, cats, the worst is when I close the door and I'm taking the exam and then I hear one of the cats scratching. And I'm just waiting, like, hopefully somebody will hear that and grab the cat because I can't get up and open the door, right? So, yeah, it's always fun. But I actually like going to a testing center and doing it because it gets me out of the house. They're made for that, right? They put you in a quiet area. And it's kind of nice. So if you have one that's close by, so when you book the exam, you'll see the testing centers that are available to you. The other option that I have used as well is that if you do say you want to do it online, I don't know if anybody has this option, but I did this during COVID. My local library, you had the option to rent meeting rooms for free. So I would just book a meeting room at my local library and do it there. Dead quiet, right? Nobody knows me, no possible way of interruption. Again, I don't know if you have the ability to do that, but it's not a bad option as well, right? The only reason I wouldn't do it at a testing center is just scheduling. If it didn't work out with scheduling, everyone wasn't one locally, you know, towards me or something like that, right? So just something to keep in mind. Yeah, if you have a nice quiet area in your house, or if you live alone, which is better, then you don't have to worry about it so much. But yeah, they check ID and all that stuff. That's another thing. Make sure that when you do register for this, use your actual name that's actually on your ID, right? Because they will look at your ID, and if it doesn't match, they won't let you take it. Okay, so just be careful with that. I know I had problems with that initially because my full name is Jean-Paul Schrammick, but I often go by JP. So when I first created my account, I did JP Schrammick, but then all my ID says Jean-Paul, and they're like, that's not you. Yeah, it is. Well, something needs to change. So yeah, just be really careful of that. Okay. They say you should have 6 months of exposure to AWS cloud design, implementation, and operations. I wouldn't worry about that too much. It's a good idea if you have some exposure for sure, but it's not a requirement. And they're not going to ask you. It's up to you to kind of decide whether you're ready or not, right? But again, this is good if you don't necessarily have any tech background at all even. So on the exam, again, the big focus is services, right? That's what AWS is. We provide services. So that's what it's going to really focus on. So first of all, understand the service that they're talking about. What does the service do? And when you would use it. Why would you choose one service over another service? If you think about those kind of factors, that will really help you determine maybe the answer, right? Well, I know this service I can do this with, so it doesn't really apply to this question, right? So things like that, all right? Think about things like, if we mention object storage service, what comes to mind?
That's true.
It's 3, right? So if the question mentions object storage service, it's going to be about S3. So if there's any one of the answers is not S3, they will probably be wrong, right? So really think about it that way, okay? Think about why you would use S3 over other services. You want to, again, distribute objects far and wide is basically why you would use S3. It's extremely durable, extremely available, things like that. Now, the way the exam is divided up is into what we call domains, right? And there's 4 domains. First one being cloud concepts, so basic stuff about the cloud, basic ideas. Then we have security and compliance, cloud technology and services, and billing, pricing, and support. And this shows the percentage of questions for each of these areas. Okay. Now, if, and none of you are going to do this, but if other people that you know are taking the exam and they don't pass, I know all you guys are going to pass, so I'm not worried. It's kind of interesting because they don't tell you what questions that you got wrong, but they will at least break down the domains and tell you how you did on each of the domains. So it's quite possible that you did really well in 3 out of the 4 of the domains, but you didn't do well on one of them, and it was just enough so you couldn't pass. At least you know what to study for next time, right? At least the area. We can't tell you exactly what questions you got wrong because then you can just go to somebody else. You can say, oh, here's all the answers to the questions, right? Or at least you know these are the ones that I got wrong. So we can't do that, but at least we'll tell you how you did on each of the domains, right? The other thing to keep in mind is that every time you take an exam, even if it's the same exam, it will be a different set of questions as well. So basically, even though you get 65 questions and you get a certain amount per domain, it just pools from a large amount of questions and it just basically chooses all those randomly, right? So it doesn't matter how many times you take the exam, it will be different every time as well. It's kind of a bummer, isn't it? But we want to make it hard, right? You know, when I would talk about, and again, more when you get up to the associate level, and I talk about, you know, it is difficult, but if this was easy, it wouldn't be worth it, right? You want this to be a challenge. You want this to be rewarding. You want to put in the effort and be rewarded for that effort, right? And you don't necessarily just want anybody to be able to pass this exam. You're going to be putting in some time and some effort into this, and you want to make it worth it, right? Again, this isn't that difficult, but I suppose that applies more when you get to the higher level ones, but just kind of keep that in mind. So let's look at a couple things here. If we want to, you know, say we're going to have this question, like define the benefits of the AWS. Can anybody, and let's see how many you can say. If I say define the benefits of the AWS cloud, first of all, how many benefits do we talk about? 6. Yeah. Okay. So 6 benefits. Can anybody tell me? Well, there's actually a few that are written on the slide. Right? So I guess I'll just go through them. Economies of scale is one of them. Right? What do we mean by economies of scale? Can anybody describe that to me or explain that to me?
Cost less when you have more of it.
Right. Volume discount kind of idea. Right. We global infrastructure. Right. I often compare it to the idea of like Costco, right? Because Costco buys such a massive amount, they're able to pass on the savings onto you, right? Same kind of idea. Global infrastructure, right? That helps us with the speed of our development, the agility, global reach as well, to gain our benefits. And then high availability, elasticity, and agility. Right? Think about those terms. Remember those 6 benefits. Okay? There's not a lot of things that I encourage people to actually memorize, but those I would. Because, excuse me. What?
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
You allergic to AWS or something?
I hope not.
Oh, not either. Jeez. All right. Because again, if you understand these, it can really help you to, figure some other things out as well. So, what would be some terms that you would use to define the actual cloud infrastructure? And there's really 3 main parts to our infrastructure. Anybody tell me one? You think about our global infrastructure.
The regions, the data center,
Say that again?
the data centers, the region.
Data centers, we don't really talk about it. One of
Regions?
concentrate on the actual cloud infrastructure more. So regions, is one. Not that you're wrong, because, say that again?
Availability zone?
The infrastructure itself. So I think I heard availability zones, did I? Yeah, so regions, availability zones. Beyond the regions and availability zones, what else do we have? Edge locations, right? Availability zones, regions, and edge locations. You're not wrong about the data centers. I would just say that you're wrong, but typically we don't talk about the data centers, right? You don't interact with the data centers directly, and you interact with the regions and the availability zones and edge locations. So that's really all that they're going to talk about. But yes, the availability zones themselves are made up of the data centers. Right? Right. So if we look at the actual global infrastructure, you mentioned edge locations. What are edge locations? What would you use edge locations for? Edge network.
Decrease latency, get closer to customers.
Yeah. Anybody tell me one service that runs in your edge location?
CloudFront.
CloudFront. Yeah. Another one?
The caching service.
Well, that's what CloudFront is. It's a caching service, right? Yeah. What's another pretty typical one, foundational one that runs on edge locations?
S3.
Nope. Runs in region. Anybody heard of Route 53? I said it online, yeah. Route 53, right? Which is basically one of the things it does is our DNS solution, right? That's one of the main things for it. But yeah, it runs on edge locations. Okay? It's one of the things, if you think about it, we have over 600 of them now. That's one of the things that makes Route 53. And I'm not allowed to say that it's 100% uptime, but it basically is, right? Because in order for Route 53 not to function, all 600 of those edge locations would need to be down. So, I don't know, alien attack would probably do it. Whether that's going to happen in our lifetime or not, right? But again, the likelihood of that happening is extremely, extremely small. Somebody said Lambda. No, Lambda runs in particular regions. So a Lambda function would be tied to a particular region. 3W said CDN. Yes, content delivery network. Yes, that is essentially what CloudFront is. Okay. There are other CDNs, right? Cloud delivery networks, or content delivery networks, right? Like Akamai, Cloudflare, same idea. Our service is called CloudFront. Right? So it's cloud something, right? It can be confusing. I get confused all the time. Okay. So yeah, we also have the idea of local zones. Does anybody know what a local zone is?
I know it's used for, to decrease latency for certain applications.
So what's the difference between a local zone and an edge location then? Because an edge location, you can use it for the same thing.
It's normally customer specific for,
Not really customer specific, no.
A local
I
zone
think you're
is-
thinking of an outpost. Is that what you're thinking of?
I'm thinking whether you're using it for a gaming application
Yeah.
or I'm thinking of while you're using it, but
Exactly, and you're right of how you would use it, but you could also use global edge network for very similar ideas. So the idea
The
is a
local
little
ones
bit
are just adapted to the demands of a particular area in terms of the computing demands.
yeah,
Like Wall Street
Local zone is like,
in New York, you have one just adapted to that area, the Wall Street.
right. So yeah, you guys are definitely on the right track. Yeah. So yeah, you're all kind of hitting at the same idea, right? It is basically, and the way that I think of them is kind of in between a region and an edge location, right? As far as what's available in there, it is an infrastructure deployment, and it places a limited number of services closer to where you want them to be, basically, right? So we have we have 33 regions, right? We have 600 edge locations or points of presence, but the local zones, I'm not even sure what the number is right now. They change a lot, but again, they're kind of in between a full-fledged region and an edge location, which is a little bit more limited. Now, what about AWS Wavelength,
that's for 5G networks.
right? Yeah.
It is close to edge location, right? Edge,
Sort of. So yes, it works with 5G. So where are the resources actually located then?
at the provider,
At the actual
like
provider.
around AT&T.
Yes, exactly, right? So these would actually live in the mobile provider's data center, right? Instead of in one of ours, essentially. Okay? So yeah, somebody said 5G edge computing. Exactly. Right, and this is actually a really neat idea. This is, I think, one of the big benefits that came out with 5G is the ability to do this, because we'd be using our mobile phones now to access applications, and us being us, we want them to be just as fast and available and feature rich as if we were at home on our laptops, right? It's gotten to the point now where I expect that. If I'm dealing with an application and they don't have a mobile app version and it's almost as good, I'm like, what's wrong with you guys, right? It's pretty crazy, but that's what we expect now. And it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? Getting more and more demand.
Thank you.
Sorry, somebody just came off mute. Oh, I got you.
I want us to get on.
Here we go. I think I muted the person, then somebody else unmuted them, but I think we got it. Cool. Then another really big concept that we talk about with AWS, and I'm going to put this to you guys. It starts with an E, and it's at the beginning of a lot of acronyms. Elasticity, yeah, right? Somebody was talking about that in one of the other classes. They're saying they struggle a lot with all the different acronyms in AWS. If it starts with an E, it probably stands for elastic. So EC2, elastic cloud compute, right? It's just that somebody was clever and it's sort of like EC squared, right? Because it's cloud compute. I'll just say elastic cloud compute, but then it would have to be ECC. Yes, I don't, whatever. I'm not the one that came up with the names.
What does T2 stand for?
Get to that in a
Two
second.
C's.
Okay. So remember that when we create EC2 instances, okay, we select all the different types and the AMIs and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to elasticity itself, we want to be able to use the resources when we need to, expand the resources when we need to, but reduce the resources when we don't need them anymore, right? Idea being that we want to be able to match the workloads that we're meeting the requests of our customers, but when we don't need those resources anymore, we don't want to be wasting them, okay? So instead of having a single instance might be enough in some cases, but not likely in most. Now we talk about the idea of horizontal scaling, right? Adding more of the same. And you can do this manually if you want to, but there's really no reason to, right? You would have create an auto scaling group, and then depending on how you configure that auto scaling group, then again, it would do the scaling for you in and out. Okay. Now, this is horizontal scaling. What's the other type of scaling?
Vertical scaling.
What's the difference?
Number.
Increase
The
the
same
capacity
thing.
of a server.
Times is horizontal.
Right? So more of the same is horizontal. So what's vertical scaling then?
Yeah.
Increase the capacity of an actual server.
Right.
Compute, more memory, more storage.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Way that I think about it is, I don't do this so much anymore, but I used to be a huge nerd when it came to hardware, right? Always building my own computers. But yeah, let's say I wanted to add more hard drives to my computer, but the case wasn't big enough to handle them. I'd have to get a bigger case, right? Scale it vertically, actually make it bigger, right? Where again, yeah, that's horizontal scaling. It would just be, okay, I'm gonna buy another PC exactly the same as the other one, right? Or build a PC exactly the same as the other one, right? So now I've got 3 or 4 PCs at home and about 8 laptops. I think 6 of them don't work, and you know, all that kind of stuff. I just moved, and I had to move all this stuff, and why didn't I just throw it out? I don't know. Doesn't seem right. Okay, but yes, EC2 auto scaling. This is horizontal scaling. Okay, with some other things we talk about vertical scaling, but just remember that with EC2 scaling, we're talking about horizontal. We're not changing the size of the instances. Right? We're not adding more CPUs. We're not adding more memory. We're adding more of the exact same instances. Okay. Don't worry about the T2 idea, right? That all goes to the instance types. Doesn't actually stand for anything in particular. The family names used to actually have meaning, but we have so many different types now that it just doesn't make sense. Okay? You just kind of have to know them. So again, the term elasticity not only means being able to add more, but reduce as well, right? So it's scaling in and out and in and out and in and out, like kind of like a rubber band kind of idea, right? That's where the term elasticity comes into play. All right. So we're going to do this a little bit of a review here. Match the following item, and I'll give you a little bit of time to kind of choose A, B, C, or D with this. So if we start with an availability zone, what would you match this up to as far as A, B, C, or D?
C.
C? And people online, again, you can just say A, B, C, or D. Okay, most people think said C here. Anybody else? B, A, D, G? A distinct location within a geographical area that's insulated from failures of other locations in the same area. You'll notice that it doesn't say anything about a region, right? It doesn't use that term. It's more of a descriptive term, but this is actually what it means. about a region? What would you match this up to?
B.
Your B?
Yeah, P.
Okay. Yeah. A name set of AWS resources in the same geographical area. Right? Because think about the names of the regions. US East 1, US East 2, US West, right? So yeah, in a same geographical area, right? What about an edge location?
D.
Okay, everybody agrees on D?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. And then what about a data center? Anybody guess what this one is?
Yeah, that's B, right?
If any of you get this wrong, I'm kicking you out of my class right now. Because you're always in college. You don't know how this works. Okay, any questions about any of those? Everybody clear? Everybody agree? Anybody want to challenge me on any of those? No? Fun, love to challenge. Fight. Okay. Now let's talk about the design principles of the cloud. Everybody remember the well-architected framework? We just talked about this for those of you that were here this morning. Can anybody tell me one of the pillars of the well-architected framework?
Operational.
Operational, did I hear operational? Operational what?
So that's.
Yeah, operational excellence is one.
Yeah, reliability.
Reliability is another one.
Security is
Availability.
performance.
I think I heard security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Performance.
Do you want to let other people answer?
Performance efficiency.
Scalability.
Sorry?
Scalability.
No. That's not actually, scalability is not actually one of the key pillars.
Business.
Sustainability.
Sustainability, yep. Did we get them all? I see online here. Resilience is not one. Scalability is not one either. Performance efficiency, yes. Availability, no. Reliability, yes. So I'm just going through the ones on lost. Operational estimates. I think there's one that you forgot.
Cost optimization.
Yeah, and there's another one I think you forgot then as well.
Business.
No,
Business sense.
no. We said sustainability. We said reliability. Still one more.
Performance.
No? It's one that is often forgotten.
Operational excellence.
Security.
Yeah, security.
I said, we said it.
Sorry. Yes, security. Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear you, but yeah, a lot of people don't think about that one, right? They think about all the technical aspects, but not necessarily security, but obviously it is huge. Let me use the acronym PROPS.
Oops.
Really? CROPSS. Okay. Props. All right. If you want to use that, CROPSS. Okay. Propses. Fair enough. But yeah, these are, again, this is another one of the few things that I get people to actually memorize. It's these 6 pillars of the well-architected framework. Okay. All right. Now if we start thinking about the actual benefits and strategies of migration to the cloud. So this again brings in things like the cloud adoption strategy, the resources to support your migration journey, the aspects of cloud economics and the cost savings of moving to the cloud, right? So this is where concepts like the cloud adoption framework come into play. Again, a pretty big thing, right? That you need to think about. How we actually pay for our resources. The differences between licensing strategies can really come into play. Right sizing is another big one. Choosing resources that have enough power to meet your needs but aren't over excessive, right? You don't need to do that like you may have needed to do that in the past. Using automation, this is huge, it's key. There's so many automation tools in AWS and it can really help you out. And also the idea of managed AWS services versus unmanaged services. Okay. If I talk about databases, can somebody tell me a managed database service?
DynamoDB.
What is another aspect of DynamoDB besides it being a managed service? What else is special about it?
It's not,
Like 10 trillion, right?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. But from a more kind of conceptual idea.
it uses keys as opposed to a relational database.
That's the structure of the database.
So what's the question again?
So you said it's a managed service. What else is kind of special about DynamoDB?
Serverless.
Serverless, exactly, right? That's where I was going. So there is a difference between a managed service and a serverless service in some cases, right? Just because it is a managed service doesn't necessarily mean it's serverless. RDS is a managed service, but you're still using instances, right? We're looking after them, but I wouldn't call it serverless, right? Because it's still using the servers relevant, okay? So watch out for those terms. S3 is another serverless service that I would talk about. EC2, managed, unmanaged? What do you think? Would you call EC2 a managed service or an unmanaged service?
Unmanaged.
Unmanaged, right? There's a lot that you have to look after. But I wouldn't call it a managed service at all. Lambda functions,
Unmanaged.
Serverless.
It's serverless, right?
serverless and managed, yeah. You don't have to do anything with them.
Yeah, so.
You don't have to manage the underlying architecture at all. And yes, they're completely serverless. So again, just to kind of make sure that everybody understands that terminology. Yeah,
Is there a listing somewhere? We just have to know what's serverless, what's managed.
you would just have to know. Yeah. Again, for the exam, we're only going to be covering the services that we talk about, right? That we talk about in all the parts and that we're going to be mentioning today. So just to understand like EC2, S3, Lambda functions, DynamoDB, RDS, right? And know if they are managed or not, essentially. Yeah. So with a cloud adoption framework, remember how we have 6 perspectives with a cloud adoption framework? And if we need to list them, which I'm going to get you to do. First of all, can anybody tell me the 2 different kind of categories of these perspectives? Kind of grouped into 2 different groups.
One is managed.
Go ahead in the back there.
Business and technical.
Right. So we have business capabilities and technical capabilities. Can anybody tell me the 3 business capabilities?
Business.
Business. Where you dress up in your business suit and you have business meetings.
Governance.
The business governance and one more. Somebody got it online. People. For business, people, and governance. And then we have the technical capability. Anybody tell me what to do? So, yeah, we got it on, right? So yeah, business people and governance for the business capabilities, platform, security, and operations for the technical. Okay. What is the cloud adoption framework? How would you describe a cloud adoption framework? Just in general terms, in your own words. I mean, these are what it includes. But what is it?
It's a program that defines how the basically.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, what did you say?
So basically how to do your business, whatever you want to do in the class.
Yeah, it's basically how you would structure your workload to operate in the cloud, right? Because it can be quite different. The strategies that you would be using, some of them might be very similar, some of them might be completely different. So yeah, you need to understand how you're going to operate. Okay? This really comes into play again when we're talking about migrating, especially. Speaking of migrating, if we think about the different strategies, and again, for those of you that were in my class, I compared migrating to moving house, which, as you probably remember, is one of the things that I hate to do the most as an adult. And I just did about, what's the date today? Yeah, like 3 weeks ago, it's moved from, I'm Canadian, I think I told you that, moved from Ontario to New Brunswick, okay, out eastern Canada. Basically just north of Maine, where I'm at. And I love it, but moving is a nightmare for me. And it's very similar to migrating in the IT world. So what you need to think about when you're migrating is all the different workloads that you have. Okay? You're not just looking at your entire enterprise. So when you're moving house, you kind of look at all the individual rooms, right? And you assess what you're going to do with all the things in those individual rooms. Think of your living room. Well, what are we going to do with the couch? What are we going to do with the TV? What about the end tables? Right? The area rug. Are we going to take them with us and move them as is into the new house, into the new living room? Sure, they fit, they look good. Okay. We're basically going to relocate all those items, right? What about all the stuff in the rec room? You know, that old couch that's there, that TV that the kids have destroyed and everything. You know, it's really not good anymore. Let's just retire it. Let's put it on the curb, which is my favorite thing to do. Or even in some cases, you might just retain things, just keep them there, right? Not even move them at all. So retire and retain aren't technically migrating, right? But it's still part of what we call the 7 R's. It's still part of this list. So we can either rehost, right? Rehosting is basically taking a physical server or a virtual machine that you're hosting on-prem, converting it to an EC2 instance. Right? You're just rehosting. Relocating. It's basically taking what you have and moving it, you know, especially if you're using large servers or something like that. Repurchasing. Repurchasing, a lot of times we talk about this with even licensing, right? You might have to, no matter how you're actually moving an application, you might have to purchase a whole new license for it, or a whole new application to do it, right? Again, if we're moving and we just chuck something out, well, let's buy a new couch, which I just did, right? Buy a new couch for a new living room. That's repurchasing. Replatform. Replatform, you might hear lift, tinker, and shift, or lift. This is basically moving, but not really having to do much. Okay, so this would be more like if you took your SQL Server database that was running on-prem, either in a virtual machine or a real server, and moved it to RDS, right? You're really not making many changes, but you're basically re-platforming, right? Whereas refactor or re-architect is basically you're starting from scratch, okay? Now, in some cases, you may need to do that, or it's about time that you do that, right? Again, one of the companies that I worked for, when they were migrating to AWS, and they actually did need to rewrite a lot of the programs, a lot of the applications that we had, and it was a huge project. But for them, it was like, well, it's about time we do this anyway, because this is a lot of really old code. We don't know where it's at. We need to modernize, so let's take this opportunity to, get the program kind of here. Okay, but obviously refactoring, re-architecting, most work, most cost, but it may be the right idea, right? It might be time to do it. So let's go through a few scenarios. Again, we're going to map the following items. So let's say we are migrating an application that was designed for Windows 2000, but it can be virtualized. So what would we match that up to? Rehosting in the cloud, migrating to S3, refactor in the cloud, or relocate to the cloud? What do we think?
A.
I hear an A.
A.
I hear another A. I see some A's in the chat.
C.
Here's C. Not.
No. I'd say C.
Say C.
Yes, please.
A or C basically is, I think, what I hear. Rehosting, right? This is really what we're doing is we're rehosting. We can virtualize this. Now, the application it's saying it's designed for Windows 2000 but can be virtualized.
Yeah, that's the keyword.
Basically what it's saying is that we could run this on an EC2 instance is the idea with this, right? We're basically rehosting it. Not having to make any real changes to it. So this means that we could run an EC2 instance that's running Windows 2000 and just run that application on there, just like we were running it before. Okay, so we're just really rehosting it, not really making any changes to it. Hey, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
What about this one? We have a VMware data center hosting a fleet of servers for an application that needs to be migrated to AWS.
D.
D, everybody says D? Everybody agrees? No B's or C's? Sure?
Yes.
Yes.
Really?
It's
Yes.
D.
Yes.
Absolutely?
Yes.
You're right. Yeah.
Can you sort of clarify the distinction between rehosting and relocating?
So in this case, if the VMware data center is hosting a fleet of servers. Okay, so we have a whole fleet of servers in this case for an application that needs to be migrated. So we're really just relocating this to the cloud. Now, it doesn't really say how we're running it in the cloud necessarily. We're just moving it into the cloud. Rehosting is basically, we're just taking a very similar platform that we already have. So in that case, we have an application that's running on Windows 2000. Again, it could be running on a physical server. It says that it can be virtualized, so I would assume that it's running on a physical server, and we're just rehosting it. So we're really not making any changes to the application itself. We're rehosting it on an EC2 instance running Windows 2000. Right? We're just virtualizing it. Whereas this, we're talking about a whole fleet of servers. We're not really, we're not rehosting the application on a different platform necessarily. We're moving all this stuff into AWS. Again, it doesn't say specifically how we're doing it. In case you don't know, you can actually create a whole virtual data center, a VMware data center within AWS. We have a service that does that, which basically allows you to just move everything that you have in VMware on site into AWS if you want to. So that's more of just a relocation. Okay. It's subtle, but do you get it? Okay. What about a business that has an application that runs okay, but they want to take advantage of cloud improvements?
C.
Right, so this is where you would probably do at least a major rewrite, maybe even a complete rewrite. Okay. Again, that example that I was giving you, the company that I worked for, the owner of the company had written the original code for a lot of the applications. And when I joined the company, it was about 10 years old. And it got to the point where whenever we were doing updates, they were just doing like wrappers around wrappers around wrappers around wrappers. And it just didn't work anymore, right? I had no idea what was going on at the core of the code. So again, as part of the migration strategy at AWS, they took that as an opportunity to rewrite it. And then the last one, the business has 5 terabytes of data that is kept for regulatory reasons. Hey, you guys are good. Amazing. Wasn't sure about that last one, but I will say this though for that last one. Why S3 Glacier and not just S3 Standard?
Because regular
They're never gonna go anywhere.
Because you're not retrieving it.
is kept for.
You're not retrieving
Kind of purposes.
Yeah, the key is that you're keeping it for regulatory reasons, right? Which, even though they don't say it, would indicate that you're probably keeping it long term and it's not going to be accessed very often. That's the only reason that you're keeping it. Otherwise, you just get rid of it, right? So yeah, it's like health data is like 7 years, or 10 years, depending on where you're at. An interesting little story with that. Me being from Ontario, I taught a class that was actually the government of Ontario, the Department of Health, and this one guy said to me, he said, you know that we cannot delete any data for anybody in Ontario at all? Like, what are you talking about? So, well, the law says that we have to keep all health data for every resident of Ontario 10 years after they pass away, right? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So the problem is that the department, us, that keeps track of that data and manages that data, we actually don't have, because of data privacy laws in Canada, they don't have the ability to see people's death certificates. So they legally are not allowed to know when a person has actually died. So they can't start that 10-year countdown ever. It's kind of a weird situation, right? So Ontario has about, let's say 20 million people in it, 25 million people. And if you think about every person, all the health data, keeping all that data forever, a lot of data, right? Hopefully they'll figure that out. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. Kind of weird situations like that. So yeah. Now what about costs? Again, if you remember, I talked about costs. I hate using the word cheap, right? Because it's never cheap. Nothing is ever cheap. When we talk about costs, we mostly refer to TCO, or total cost of ownership, right? So this includes your operating costs, your fixed costs, your labor costs, and licensing costs. Like I mentioned, again, personal experience working in a data center for a particular company. It was a railway. We had no visibility into the actual cost of the data center itself, the electrical costs, the cooling costs, the real estate costs. From an IT perspective, we only knew what we put into it, right? The data, the hardware, and the people that managed it. But there's a lot of other costs that come into play. So when we talk about TCO, and how AWS can help you with your TCO, it's total cost. And it's total cost over a period of time as well. That has a lot to do with it as well. Okay? And the idea is, and you'll see this a lot, you're trading these fixed costs for variable costs. Right? Or sometimes you'll hear the term CapEx, capital expenditure, right? Instead of having to go out and buy hardware and put all this money out up front, you don't have to do that with AWS, right? It is variable. So we're going to walk through an exam question, right? A couple of exam questions here, right? And these would be questions that would be very similar to what you would actually get on the exam. And we're just going to kind of help you about how you would actually go and analyze these questions so they can answer them properly, right? So first question, which AWS cloud architecture design principle supports the distribution of workloads across multiple availability zones? So when you see a question like this, the first thing that you should do is pick out some keywords or phrases. All right? So first thing that I would kind of think about is, okay, what are they actually asking for? Are they asking for a service? Are they asking for a concept? They're asking for a design principle, right? So think about that first. So what AWS architecture design principle? Okay. And then next, what kind of design principle and which one supports the distribution of workloads across multiple availability zones? Okay. So when I read these questions, even before I read the possible answers, I try and think about what the answer might be. Okay. And if you don't know, you don't know. If you can't think of anything, but I at least try, before I look at the answers, try and think about, oh, I know what this is. Sometimes you'll just know it right off the bat, right? Sometimes you might have a pretty good idea, and once you see the answer, you're like, oh yeah, that's it, right? Other times you're like, I don't know, I have no idea what they're talking about. And that's totally fine as well. So here are the possible answers. Implement automation, design for agility, design for failure, or implement elasticity.
Design for failure.
Design for elasticity is that?
Failure.
Just that's the server sheet.
I think D.
Elasticity is a.
I think C and D.
C,
Yeah.
C.
C and D. D. Right? So here's the other thing that I would often do if I wasn't sure. I think everybody's kind of made the choice between C and D. So basically, what you've done is you've ruled out a couple of the answers, right? Which is a really good way to start. And that, again, typically is what I will do if I'm not sure. I know it's not A. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Designing for agility? No. We're talking about the distribution of workloads across multiple availability zones. But what does that give you, right? If you're distributing your workload across multiple availability zones, what does that help you with? Why would you do that?
Redundancy, failover.
Redundancy, right? So that's where we get the design for failure. Okay? So if you're not quite sure, read the question again and think about it. Well, why would you do this? Why would you distribute your workload across availability zones? What is that going to give you? And how is that going to benefit you? It's going to help you in case you have a failure, right? It's nothing to do with elasticity, right? I mean, you can, like, if we talk about auto-scaling groups, yes, you can have an auto-scaling group that spans several different availability zones, but you don't have to, right? You can, yes, like somebody said, you can have an auto-scaling group in one availability zone. That still gives you elasticity, okay? You don't need to have multiple availability zones to implement elasticity. It also, when it says elasticity, you don't know if we're talking about horizontal scaling or vertical scaling, right? So, yeah, design for failure. What about this one? System administrator is reviewing a group of servers that were found during a portfolio discovery. All servers are migrating to AWS. The servers have no current owner. There is little to no traffic to the servers. Which migration strategy should the system administrator suggest for these servers? Now, before I show the answers, again, think about that. Think about the 7 R's, basically, is what they are. And if you can't think of one specifically, maybe have at least 2 or 3 in your head. It could be this one, it could be this one, it could be this one. Okay? But again, looking at the keywords, here we have a group of servers. All of these servers, we're going to migrate to AWS. They have no current owner, and there's little to no traffic for these servers. Okay, these are the kind of the key phrases, right? Servers are rarely used, essentially. So does everybody kind of have at least 1 or 2 in their head, right, that you would do with these? So would you rehost them, replatform them, retain them, or retire them?
Retire.
D.
Yeah? Anybody else?
Rehost.
Okay. So this is A. So D, I see replatform as well.
Yes, it's a question of what the key term is.
Yeah.
You have to migrate it.
Yes, it says all servers are migrating to AWS. That's what the question says, yes.
Can't be C or D.
So it can't be C or D, right? If the question says that all the servers are migrating to AWS, we can immediately eliminate C and D, right?
That's confusing
Wait,
because if all the servers are migrated
Right.
and at the same time there is no traffic to that server.
It doesn't say there's no traffic.
It says, oh, there is
Little to-
Little to no traffic.
Okay, I should read closely.
Right. Okay. So that means there
That's my
is
confusion.
some traffic to at least some of the servers. Okay. So you were pretty quick to say retire. Yeah, just get rid of them. That's my attitude too, right? But read the question.
Not with the 6 laptops you're still keeping.
Yeah. Read. You know what is even worse? Is I had a junk drawer in my office. And when I was packing, instead of going through the junk drawer, guess what I did?
Put it in
I
the box.
dumped it in a box and brought it with me.
It's still in the box in the garage too, right?
Well, I've only moved for 3 weeks, right? I've only been home for 2. So
Okay.
give me a break, man. It'll give me some time. And I have work, right? So geez.
It's never leaving that box in the garage.
You know, when the last time we moved, we said if there's any boxes that haven't been opened in a year since we moved, they get thrown out. And we're going to use that same strategy.
Next stuff.
Been at the same house for 30 years. I have boxes at 30 years old in the garage. Just won't throw them away.
I don't even have kids that are 30 years old.
I have 2 that are more than that.
And I try to throw them away. No. So, sorry, back to the question. You guys, I have ADHD, and if you guys take me down some path somewhere, I get lost, okay? So it's really hard for me to come back. So, what did we decide? We decided that C and D are not right, right?
Yes.
So A or B, basically. Okay? Really? Retire? So, here's the other thing about this question, and it is kind of interesting, right? What it says is, what migration strategy should the system administrator suggest for these servers?
I still believe retire. They have no current owners.
Right.
So there's nothing you can do with them.
So you're right. Okay. Again, what's the actual question?
Suggestions.
Suggest. Suggest is the key word.
Not what they should actually do necessarily, right? Because if that's what it said, if it said, what should they do? I would go by the idea that it does say there's little to no traffic, which means they're probably still being used, right? But if it was me and I wasn't the one that was making the actual decision, what it's asking you is, what should you suggest? I would suggest that you just retire them, right? Because they're hardly being used at all. Now, maybe they'll say, yeah, but I don't think we should because of this, this, and this. But again, it doesn't really say that in the question, okay? So really watch out for what the actual question is. It's giving you that scenario, and it could lead down a different path than what you're thinking.
Well, in this situation, only one of those highlighted things matters. And it's the fact that all servers are migrating. So of course, retire is none of that other stuff shouldn't matter.
So you could retire the existing servers and you could just start over, basically, is what it's saying. Right? It is confusing, right? But again, you need to look at the actual question. Which migration strategy should the system administrator suggest for these servers? So the question is asking you if it's your job to analyze and give a suggestion. That's what is the best suggestion in this case.
But why would it be anything else if you're moving everything? Besides, that's the whole goal, is to retire that stuff.
Well, if the question said something like, there's little to no traffic to the servers, however, they are still vital to your workload, then maybe rehosting would be the right answer, right? So, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say they're vital. It doesn't say that they're business critical. It doesn't really give you any reason why you can't just retire them. Okay? If it said specifically you can't retire them, or retirement is not an option, then it would be one of the other ones, right? Maybe even, no. Okay?
Besides, it's an opportunity to do an audit on what's really needed and not needed.
And they could be servers that are running and they're just wasting resources. I've worked for companies that, there's been servers that have been in the corner in a closet somewhere, and like, okay, well, what did that one do? I don't know. Dave was responsible for that server. Well, let's go talk to Dave. Well, Dave left like 2 years ago.
Unplug it, see what happens.
So what do? You unplug it and see who screams, right? Nobody screams, then you get rid of it. But yeah, so be very careful about these questions. Take your time and read them. It's kind of the lesson in this particular one. Because again, this isn't necessarily testing you on whether you really know these or not. It's actually testing you on whether you really understand the question, right? Make sure you read the question and you really understand what they're asking. Okay? Got it?
I have a question.
Yeah?
What's the difference between reused and replatform?
Rehost and replatform? So again, if I had a SQL Server database that was running on a server in my data center, like on a physical server, and I wanted to get it into the cloud, if I was to rehost that, I would just run it on an EC2 instance.
Okay.
If I was to replatform that, I would run it in RDS. See the difference?
Say that again, please.
So let's say I'm running a data, who said that? You did? If I'm running a database on-prem, okay, and I'm running it just on a physical server, so I have SQL Server installed on a Windows server, whether it's physical or VM, it doesn't really matter. If I was to move that as is into an EC2 instance in AWS, so basically build an EC2 instance, install Windows on it, install SQL Server, and move the database, that would be rehosting. Replatforming would be if I took that SQL Server and I ran that in RDS instead, which is a managed database service, right? That would be the difference. Because RDS is considered a platform as a service, right? Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Some of them are very subtle, the differences, right? So you really have to kind of think of an actual situation. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's take a break. All right, 10 minutes. All right, I'll put up a timer. Everybody come back in about 10 minutes. Let's make it till 5 after, just to make it easy. Okay, so 12 minutes. Okay. Remember that when it comes to survey time, I gave you guys 2 extra minutes.
Oh, sir. Congrats on the house.
Oh, yeah, thank you, man. How's everything been going?
And that was 7.
Busy day. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we did. And then, I mean,
Unmuted. Sorry, muted. We're having private conversations about y'all online here, so we didn't want you to hear it. So again, the shared responsibility model. For those of you that were in my class, what are the two things that I talked about that you will always be responsible for no matter what? Do you remember? How many people were in my class? I don't think any. Maybe online. Let's see. When we talk about the shared responsibility model, again, the idea is that there is AWS is going to take on some responsibility, the customer is going to take on some responsibility. But there are two things that I like to point out anyway that you will always be responsible for.
Action.
Nope.
The customer responsible for, or the data, who responsible for?
The customer is always going to be responsible for.
Security, what's in the cloud?
Something.
What's in the cloud? Yeah.
Customer data.
Yeah, but again, that can vary. I think I heard it, customer data, so data, right? And access.
To the data.
Access not just to the data, but access to any of the resources. So here's the way that I think of security in general. Think about installing an alarm system on your house, right? You can get the best installer, the best alarm company, the best system, whatever. Right? All those companies have done their duty. But if you take that system and you set the master code to 1, 2, 3, 4, and you tell all your neighbors and all your friends and all your family that's the master code, and a month later your house gets broken into and everything gets stolen, is that the alarm company's fault? It's your fault, right? So very similar with AWS. So just remember that. We give you all the tools to make your system as secure as it possibly can be. But if you do something like that, it basically defeats the entire purpose of it. Right? So you do need to make sure that you understand your levels of responsibility, right? So here's a simple question. Who is responsible for patching the underlying infrastructure of AWS Lambda?
AWS.
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, right? Again, Lambda is a managed service. It's a serverless service. You have nothing to do with the underlying architecture. Yeah, we'll take that one on for you, right? Who is responsible for the encryption of data within Amazon Textract? Don't worry about what Textract is, just think about any real service.
Encryption of data.
It's already in software, Amazon software, so it should be Amazon.
The customer, okay? Now, with that being said, typically the answer for encryption of data within pretty much anything is going to be the customer. However, as of the beginning of last year, the default setting for an S3 bucket is to have your data encrypted. Okay, prior to that, it was an option. Right, the default setting was not have decrypted. But I would say, ultimately, your responsibility is when it comes to encryption, right? As 99% of the time, it's an option. All right. Okay. So here we go. Let's match the following items. We'll go through these one at a time. I'm not sure why they have them all. But a managed service, A, B, or C?
C.
B. B.
Oh, no. C. B.
I think I heard B. I think I heard C.
B. C. You said managed service.
A managed service. What is B? You would be responsible for configuring encryption, network protection, application security, and your customer data. Okay. Think of a RDS. database. Okay? Your responsibility to enable encryption. Your responsibility to set up the networking protection, the applications that you're using with it, the security of it, and especially the data. Okay? You need to control who has access to that database, right? You could leave it completely open and anybody could access it, right? You could, and that is your responsibility to prevent that from happening. Okay? What about a self-managed service? Anybody give me an example of a self-managed service? EC2, right? You're responsible for all of that with EC2. Again, we're going to look after the underlying architecture, the underlying hardware that it runs on, but beyond that, it's all you. Okay. And then the last one, yeah, with a fully managed service, that's where we have the least amount of responsibility. But you'll notice that it always says customer data, doesn't it? Always think about that. Right? Even with something like an S3 bucket, if you put data into an S3 bucket, by default it's encrypted. And by default, the setting when you create a bucket is only the owner has access. But you could make it public. That could be a problem, right? So again, it's your responsibility to manage who gets to access it. Right? So let's kind of keep that in mind. Everybody good with the differences between these three so far? All right. Now we move on to security, governance, and compliance. Right? And one of the things that we kind of talk about or bring into this conversation is think about when we talk about regions and the different reasons why you would choose a particular region. Well, here's a scenario for you. Let's say we have an application that we want to copy into a different region. What do we need to check before you begin planning a move into that region? I would say there's 2 or 3 things that you think about.
Governance compliance.
Governance compliance is probably the first thing that I would think about, right? Because that may stop you right then and there. Right? You may not have a choice at all. But if that's okay, you pass those. What else would you possibly think about? Costs, right? Why costs? Why would you think about costs?
It's different per region.
They can change, right? They can change. Okay. What about something else that you may want to consider? What else could change between regions?
Availability of that application.
The usability of that customer base.
Yeah, the availability of the services, right? That can change. Yeah. Okay. So those are big things. Also, when somebody mentioned it online, latency to your customers as well is something that you would consider. Okay. But if you kind of look at the scenarios, you have an application, you want to copy to a different region, that may be why you're doing that. It's because you want to bring that closer to your users. Okay. So you want to make sure, first of all, the question is, what do you need to check before you do that, basically? Not why you're doing this, but what do you need to check? Okay. So again, if this was an actual question, make sure you understand what they're actually trying to ask, okay? Not that latency isn't wrong, but not really, doesn't really come into this scenario. So yeah, I mean, security, governance, compliance, you really need to think about what you need to abide by. What does your organization need to abide by? Internal compliance, external compliance, laws, local laws always come into play. Okay, so you really need to think about all these different things. Now, if we look at encryption, it's kind of an odd question. What encryption options are available in AWS Cloud? Let me put it to you a different way. what are the different scenarios that you need to think about as far as encrypting your data?
What do you mean? Do you encrypt before you send it over? Do you encrypt where it's addressed? Or do you encrypt,
How sensitive or personal is the data?
Right, but if you've already, yeah, definitely, that's one thing. I'm not going to say you're wrong, that's not really what I was going for.
You're talking about encryption at rest and encryption in transit?
Right, so you need to think about when your data is actually being stored, encrypting it, when your data is being sent, encrypting it, right? You also want to think about, okay, am I going to encrypt it on, and I think this is where you're going with it as well, server side, client side, both, right? And how you're going to encrypt that, okay? I had again, a laptop, a Windows laptop that I used BitLocker on, right, to encrypt the hard drive. Well, I basically took, what I used to do is take a copy of that, and then if you think about it, you could take that encrypted copy of your hard drive. If I stored it in an S3 bucket that was encrypted, I was basically doubling encrypting it, right? So it's encrypting encrypted data already. That's pretty darn secure as well. Also think about, well, I was actually transferring that, uploading that, I'm using an HTTPS connection, so while it's in transit, it's encrypted as well, right? So that's about as safe as you can get. Okay. So if we start thinking about how we detect threats, which one of these services would you say is something that we could use to detect a threat?
Like Amazon Lab Duty.
No access.
the Shell standard?
I hear a few different answers, but I hear one pretty commonly. Yeah, this one is guard duty. Okay. I still think they should have called this one guard dog. Every time I read it, I want to say guard dog. It would have been a really cool logo. Guard duty. Which one of these services is available at no charge? Which one of these services is actually included?
Shield standard.
Shields.
And is it inspector?
Yeah, shields.
The Shield standard is no charge.
And what does Shield standard do?
DoD. I mean,
Department of Defense?
no. What do you call them? Repeated attacks.
Yeah.
DDoS, denial of service.
DDoS.
Denial of service, DDoS. That's what I meant.
Distributed denial of service. Yeah. You know how I think about it? Anybody see the movie 300?
Yes.
Remember the scene where they have like millions of arrows that are flying at them and they just all get behind their shields and all the arrows just hit their shields? That's what this makes me think of, right? That distributed denial of service attack. And we're just holding up this shield and we're blocking all of it.
It's probably how they thought about it too.
Yeah, probably, right? Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it.
Which service is a data security service? Data security service.
Amazon Macy's. Macy's.
Yeah? Yeah. Macy's actually used, one of the things that it does is it looks at things like S3 buckets and the data in S3 buckets. Okay. Which service has automated best practice check?
Inspector.
But security, security.
Huh?
Oh, yeah, it is. Actually.
Okay. So, yeah, just kind of, you should know the basic differences between these. Okay. If you don't, do a little bit more study. Okay. But it sounds like you would at least get the majority of these correct, which is fine. Next, identity access management. Okay. Let's see what it tells me. I was going to say, what's the actual tool that you use for identity and access management?
I am.
I am identity and access management, right? Yeah, exactly. Can anybody tell me why you would want to protect the AWS root account? Point of that.
Everything, you can do anything you want.
Do anything with that account, right? What's best practice when you first create an AWS account having to do with the root account?
Create another one.
Create a user.
Yeah. Create another user, right, that has enough privileges to do what you need to do on a daily basis, and then lock the root user credentials away somewhere. Okay? Manage them like your business depends on it, because there's definitely cases where it does. Okay. There have definitely been times where the root user credentials have been made public. Somebody's gotten a hold of them, held the company hostage because they changed everything. Said, if you don't give us $10 million, we're going to wipe out your entire company. The company called their bluff. The company no longer exists. Okay. It can happen. It has happened. Don't let it happen to you. You don't want to be that guy. He could be the guy that's like sleeping in a tent under the bridge somewhere. You know, who knows what's happened to that guy. All right. I'm just going to give you guys another thing about the root account. What happens if you lose the credentials to the root account?
You have to contact AWS to prove who you are before they reset it.
So they can reset it, is what you're saying. Yeah. It is something that can be done. Yeah. But obviously,
So AWS can help you if you lose the root.
if you lose the credentials, yeah. But it's a pretty long, drawn out process, obviously, right? So yeah, be very, very, very careful.
But if,
I was thinking
isn't that
it's
the same way, if that guy, somebody took them with a chance, can the company call and retry to get it?
I suppose they could. Yeah, I suppose they could, but they didn't in that particular situation. I don't think they believed him.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So that's.
But it happens, right?
Yeah.
One of the, I'm not sure if this was exactly the way it happened, but I know that things like this have happened before, is that people are doing testing of code and they'll hard code credentials in their programming, right? Just to say, and they'll do a high level account just so they don't run into any permissions issues. And then they post that in a public repository. And people are constantly scanning public repositories looking for stuff like that because it happens all the time. So yeah, just watch out for that. AWS actually scans public repositories as well, looking for AWS credentials. And if they find them, they will notify you that they found your credentials in a public spot. So yeah. What authenticate methods can you use in AWS? What authenticate methods? What authentication methods
MFA.
can be used in AWS?
Methods.
Yeah, kind of an odd question, but this wouldn't be an exam question, but yeah, I think you guys are getting it, right? MFA, the IAM user account, and short-term credentials. When we talk about temporary credentials, what comes to mind? Anything in particular? Roles. Roles, yeah, that's exactly what it's called. So yeah, what services are used to authorize users within AWS? Well, again, we all know the main one, right? IAM. But there's a couple other ones that kind of come into play as well. Resource Access Manager, which I know in my classes we didn't talk about. It allows you to share resources across multiple accounts. And again, organizations, right, allows you to control multiple AWS accounts from a central location. Can anybody tell me the difference between, before we go to the next part, what's the difference between authorization and authentication? Two very distinct.
Authorization means you have permission to do something. Authentication means you are who you say you are.
Exactly. You were in my class, I think. Right? That's basically the way I. Authentication is basically proving who you say you are. Authorization is, okay, now what are you allowed to do? Okay. Sometimes the same system will do both. Sometimes it's two separate systems. So keep that in mind. But it is really important to understand authentication versus authorization. Okay. Which of the following are principles used by AWS IAM to assign permission policies? Think about this for a second. See if any come to mind. Right?
Permission.
KMS.
Use privilege.
Oh, yeah, user
User policies in groups, right? This would have been nice if this all didn't come the same part, but, right? Principle of least privilege is definitely something good, but it's not having to do with actually assigning permissions. Okay? And remember, policies can be assigned to either a group or a user or a role. Is it better practice to assign policies to a user or to a group?
group.
Why?
Because it's harder to track.
It's less time consuming and easier to track.
You need to speak up. I can hear what you're saying, but you're so shy and quiet. What was it? Because I think you're right. Say it.
Maybe he just said it in the back.
You to say it because I think you were right.
I was just saying just the same thing. It's just easier to track, so you don't have to keep doing it by person to person.
Right. It's a lot easier to manage, right? For sure. Because then you can just move people from group to group and you don't have to change their policies. Right. See, you're good. Right. Which services are data stores for security related information? Now, again, it's just going to come up on the next slide, but just think about it in your head. You know, which services are data stores for security related information? So think about if you want to store very sensitive information, kind of services would you might use? I'll give you a hint. What if you want to store secrets? What would you use?
Secret
What
management.
would you use to manage a bunch of secrets? Right? That's one for sure, right? And that's usually the one that I think about.
Okay.
But the other thing is when it comes to encryption, right? So cloud HSM is very high level encryption. We talked about KMS, right? There's also certificate manager. Certificate manager is more than just how you can keep track of your HTTPS or TLS certificates. It may not seem like a big deal, but if they expire, it can be a huge problem, right? So it is good to have. What about if you want to gain visibility into our compliance, AWS compliance? You know how to do that?
AWS artifact. Is that one of them?
That's one of them, yeah. Artifacts. Anybody know another one?
Documents.
Nope. It's kind of like, I don't know, hub where you keep a lot of kind of security related information.
Management consoles.
Security hub.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah. So the idea here is that, again, we need to be compliant, obviously. We need to be even more compliant than you need to be. So we have third-party compliance, and this is where you can actually go and see our evaluations, right? To make sure that we're meeting the requirements that you need to meet at least. All right. Security capabilities that we provide and documentation. which AWS service or feature provides an additional layer of security at the instance level?
Security group.
Again, for those of you that were in my class, a few of you that I think were here, I used the hotel model to distinguish talking about this, but yes, you're right, security groups, right? Where would you apply a network ACL, a NACL?
And
It's similar to security groups
BCP.
virtual VPC.
in a VPC, but not to the VPC itself,
Uh-huh.
to the subnets, yeah.
So subnets.
Right?
Okay.
So NACLs get applied to the subnets, the security groups get applied to the resources within the subnet. What real-time guidance does Trusted Advisor provide? Again, think about the different areas of Trusted Advisor. Ooh, at least this one didn't give you all of them all at once.
C.
3 of these.
B.
B,
C.
B,
You say B twice.
B, D.
BDF.
BDF.
We'll just give you guys a thing.
CD,
You told me about?
CDN.
B, D, and E. Do you remember the graphic of Trusted Advisor and the 5 different kind of categories? That's usually what I try and remember. So maybe look at that, look at the slide again, or even look at Trusted Advisor, and that will help you with that. What about this one? Let's say developers ask you to share the root account access key so they can use it and make requests to AWS services. What should you recommend? First of all,
No.
I'd probably fire that person, right? They would no longer be a part of my team anyway, if I had anything to say about it. Yeah, never use a root account for anything, right? Unless you absolutely have to. And there's very few situations where you actually. Services that are security enforcement services. So the way I would put this is what services, security services do we have that actually can take action, right, against certain things? Again, things like guard duty, inspector, Macy, Shield. All right, let's go through an exam question here. Which task is the responsibility of the customer according to the AWS shared responsibility model? Okay, so responsibility of the customer according to the shared responsibility model. Now, remember one thing that I mentioned with this is that it can change. The level of responsibility can change depending on the service. Okay, so let's see what the actual answers are. Well, patches on RDS DB, patch the operating system of the DB instance, determine which services have access to the DynamoDB table, or patch the VPC network devices. See what they did here. In this case, again, it should be pretty easy to rule out 1 or 2 of these, at least, right? If you look at B, for instance, you should know that you have no visibility when it RDS into the actual underlying instances, right? You have no control over the operating system. So that one should be ruled out pretty much immediately. D, you have no visibility into the actual network devices either, right? Remember, AWS manages all the hardware. Install patches on RDS DB instances. Or determine which services have access to DynamoDB table. Right? Again, think about which one sounds the best. Remember what I said, the 2 things that you are always responsible for is customer data and controlling access to resources are always your responsibility, right? And that's basically what this is saying here. What services have access to the DynamoDB table? That's your responsibility, okay? Installing patches on RDS DB instances, again, that's something else that AWS is going to take responsibility for. What about this one? Company has an application server that runs on EC2 instance. The application server needs to access contents within a private Amazon S3 bucket. What is the recommended approach to meet this requirement? So if you think about this, we have an Amazon EC2 instance, and it needs to be able to access contents within a private S3 bucket. So what's the best way to do this? C and A.
A.
See a B as well. B.
So it's B.
This is actually a pretty tough one.
I just hope I forget this time.
B.
I hear B.
B.
Pass.
I think A.
You think A?
Yes, A.
Yeah? Remember what happened last time?
I know.
Yeah.
That was one of the labs.
Remember that you can assign a role to an EC2 instance, and that essentially gives it permissions, right? The EC2 instance itself gives it a set of permissions based on the policy that is applied to that role. So yeah, that'd be the right answer, right?
Pairing is VPC to VPC, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it has nothing to do with accessing a bucket because the bucket will not be in a VPC anyway, right? It's in a region, but not in a VPC. Yeah. Right? Right. So that's security and
Does the S3, the S3 server does not attach with EC2? That's why it's a little bit confusing, right?
S3 is a service itself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a serverless service, right? So it lives in a region. It's not tied to a VPC. Now, normally, the way that you would access a bucket is you have to, again, you have to have some set of permissions to access anything, right? And if you read the question, it says the company has an application server that runs on an EC2 instance. The application server needs to access the contents. So the idea is that if you apply a rule to an EC2 instance, any application that runs on that EC2 instance will inherit the permissions of that rule. And if the application itself needs to access that bucket, it needs permission somehow to be able to do that, right? So you would assign a rule, or it's actually called a EC2 profile now. I don't know why or instance profile. I'm not sure why they
Is
changed the
there a
name.
certain application which will attach, which will be in EC2 instances, so you can go to Amazon S3, like the to S3?
Well, the idea here is the application needs to access a bucket, right? And so the application needs a certain set of permissions to be able to access that bucket. So how are we granting those permissions to that application? The way that we're doing that is by assigning a particular role to the EC2 instance the application is running on. That role, then we would have a policy that says, yes, you are allowed to access this particular bucket. That means the application itself would inherit those permissions. Does that make sense? Yeah. Kind of like a service account. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that idea, especially with Windows, right? Where you'll have an application that itself needs to access other resources. Well, you have to give that application permission somehow. In the Microsoft world, you create what's known as a service account, and then you give that service account a particular set of permissions. It's kind of the same idea. Because the application isn't necessarily acting on behalf of anybody, right? It itself needs to be able to access the bucket for whatever reason. So it needs permission, and that's how you do it. All good? Okay. now let's talk about, we'll get to another break. Methods of deploying and operating. So different ways that we can actually provision and operate our resources within AWS and how we access those resources as well. So we have a company that's migrating to the cloud. They have a regulatory restriction that means they cannot share hardware with other companies. Which of the following meets their needs? So, what's the normal way that our EC2 instances run within our data centers? Does anybody know?
Shared.
Virtually on the same,
Virtually, yeah.
multiple ECs on the same server.
Right, like on shared, we could have multiple EC2 instances from multiple accounts all running on the same host, right? Or physical server. Well, there are times where we might have a regulatory restriction that says we can't do that. So what that means is that, yeah, this is interesting. If these are your choices, then a private cloud deployment.
That's good. It's a dedicated host.
Exactly, right? Dedicated host if you're going to run, if you wanted to run it in the cloud. But if these are your only choices, then private cloud deployment. But yeah, you guys are right. A dedicated host is how you could do it in AWS, right? For those of you that don't know, what that means is that you will get a host that's assigned to you and nobody else. And no other account can run on that host, all right? It's an expensive way to run.
Individual server on the cloud.
Pardon?
That the host being on a single server, is that what it means?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so it is possible, but in this scenario, that's not a choice. So your only choice then would be a private cloud deployment. Private cloud deployment just means your own data center on-prem, essentially, is what it means. This is another kind of neat, there's some other neat services that you can have. Outposts are actually really neat. You can get either just individual servers or an entire rack actually installed locally in your data center. It's our hardware. We look after it. You don't even touch it. But you access it just like you would access any other services on AWS. That's kind of cool. I want one in my basement, but I would need another job, I think, to have. I don't really have a use for it. It'd just be really cool to have. You guys work in the data centers. Do you have any extra hardware laying around? No comment, right? Good. You guys are good. You guys are good.
We try.
All right. Let's say you've been asked to implement a disaster recovery plan that requires copies of data to be stored in multiple geographic locations. What component of the cloud should be used to meet this requirement?
So are we asking what service they should use?
In this particular scenario,
S3.
you have a disaster recovery plan that requires copies of data. That's all that we're mentioning, right? So if we have to keep copies of data in multiple geographic locations.
That's S3, I guess.
Okay, I would say S3.
Yeah, just kind of, and yeah, right? Different ways how we could do this. Again, the idea is that however you do it, you would put it in multiple regions. Yeah, sure, you could put it in different S3 buckets. You could have EBS volumes, copies of EBS volumes and different. The idea is that, yes, you just spread them out over different regions, right?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Why in this instance would an availability zone not be enough since it operates within a region and the data centers are shielded from one another?
In this scenario, it's saying you want to store it in multiple geographic locations for whatever reason.
Okay, geographic, that's
Yeah.
the key word.
It adds that extra layer of reliability, right, or security. It's pretty extreme, to be honest,
that's what
right?
I'm thinking.
But there's some companies that do it, right? If I had business critical information that basically meant if I lost that information, it would be the end of my company, I'd do it. Even if it was in an S3 bucket, which is 11 nines of durability, I'd do it. I'd replicate it in another bucket in another region. It'd be worth it for me. Again, the chances are so slim that anything's going to happen to that, but am I willing to take that risk? You know, think of Amazon, right? Think of any like really large company. Do you think they're willing to take that risk? Probably not, right? The minimal cost more than outweighs the risk. So, yeah, I'd do it. Now, if I just had a small company and wasn't that big a deal, maybe not. But large corporation, large enterprise, yeah, absolutely.
I think Amazon give example like BMW. They do everything. They have business everywhere, so they suggest.
They would do it for various reasons. Yeah. Yeah, they would definitely do it for various reasons. But let's say it only operated in the US, but it was a large corporation, I would still probably do it if it meant the possibility of, you know, my company disappearing if I lost that data. Yeah, I'd do it in another region. So yeah.
I guess it's all to do with fear, because if the technology is getting a lot more better and reliable, we should be able to trust.
Well, it's 11 nines of durability, which again translates, there's different kinds of ways, but the way basically it is if you have a million documents, the chances of you losing one of those documents may happen in 10 million years, right? That's basically how durable it is. To me, that 11 nines is more of a legal thing than anything, because we'd have to lose an entire region, entire region to lose objects in an S3 bucket. And the chances of that happening are pretty slim. Again, I don't know, alien attack, big EMP pulse, I don't know, something take out the entire west coast of the US, right? Something pretty major. I mean, you watch TV and it's coming like what, next week or something? Everybody's freaking out. A lot of services, what this is kind of getting at, a lot of services are regional, right? Almost every service is regional, exists in a particular region. Because these services all need to exist somewhere, right? There are some, there's very few exceptions like Route 53, like CloudFront that actually live on our edge locations, right? But the majority of services actually are tied to a particular region. So keep that in mind. All right. Direct Connect we use for a private connection to our AWS from a data center. VPN is another way that you can do that, but it goes through the public internet. Okay. Internet gateway, when you attach it to a VPC, allows traffic in and out of the internet to your resources. And NAT gateways allow traffic from a private subnet out to the internet. So these are services that you should at least have a basic understanding of when it comes to networking.
I thought the NAT was on, oh, never mind.
Okay. NAT has to be in a public subnet.
That's why I asked. I saw it in the private, but
Yeah,
I thought
no.
the Boston would be in the private.
I'm not sure why they have that NAT gateway in the private subnet. It really shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's why I was.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, it shouldn't be. The NAT gateway has to be in a public subnet. That's. No, but no, you'd never have a NAT gateway in a private subnet. It needs to have access to the internet. The only way to do that is through the internet gateway from a public subnet.
Right.
That's kind of weird. I don't know why that's shown. Okay. Now we talk about the global infrastructure a little bit, right? Remember, regions are made up of availability zones, which in turn are made up of data centers, but we don't talk about data centers really. They don't really exist, right? Right? But yes, the hardware does have to live somewhere, but you really don't have any visibility into the data center level, just availability level. How many availability zones do we recommend that you at least use for pretty much everything?
2.
At least 2, right? Again, it's fairly inexpensive and you might as well take advantage of it. By default, resources in a private subnet can communicate with which of the following? Again, this is a networking. So think about this. I think the next slide actually again shows you both the answers. So just kind of think of it in your head. A private subnet by default, what the resources within that private subnet, sorry, they can communicate with which of the following. Again, remember when we talked about routing tables and creating the IP address range of VPC and what the default entry in a routing table is. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Resources in other private subnets and resources in other public subnets. Basically, just remember that by default, resources can communicate with anything within the same VPC. Okay. VPCs to me equate to a LAN or local area network. So anything within the VPC, even if they're in different subnets, it's all considered local traffic as far as routing is considered. What services run at the edge? There's a few. Okay. There's one that's a little bit weird to me, though.
CloudFront, Route 53.
Snow family?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
does.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
I
don't
was
know about that one.
literally writing a paper on us doing stuff at the
Then they
time.
can put a truck in an area and they move that around, no?
Elvira, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Snow family runs on edge locations? It's
Yeah,
It's not-
that is, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, that is, so the understanding on this is the fact that you're bringing it closer to the customer for low latency, having that data in that raw form, in that physical device, and you can move it real quick into the AWS backbone. So that was my understanding of having Snow Family within this category.
so I guess the idea is that when you ship it back, instead of it actually going to a particular region, it just connects to an edge location, then goes to wherever you need it to go. I suppose that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose that makes sense. I just never really thought of it that way, I guess. Yeah. So for the Snow family, like the Snow Cone, and the, not the Snowmobile anymore, the offline storage, right? Where you can have them ship you the actual device, you upload your data, and then you ship it back to them, and then they offload that data. I guess the idea is where that data gets offloaded, physically connected to, is at an actual location and not in an actual region somewhere. I guess that's the idea.
Wouldn't they also could be like if you needed some data to be accessed for a certain period of time for certain occasion, they could bring it the truck and let it be used in the area and then move it away later, no?
No, you wouldn't use it for that. You could, I suppose, but not normal, yeah. It's usually used for migration, right? It's to move data from one location to another. You could, in some situations, you may be doing something like field work where you're not connected to the internet, and you can bring that device with you and then load it up and then, ship it back, right? That's something that you could do.
Yeah, like while it's at
That's
the
green
customer
dots.
location, you're technically making some AWS services available at the edge, like compute and storage.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way.
It may not be connected.
When I think of the edge, I think of the actual edge locations. And I guess it's not tactically, you're right, but that's just the way that I guess I think. Because an outpost isn't at an edge location either. It's actually in your data center. So the idea here is that it's kind of, I guess what they're going for is when they say services run at the edge, they're saying outside of a particular region. Now, let's put it that way. I guess that makes more sense. I think if they would have said what services run at an edge location, that could be a little bit different. But they're saying at the edge, basically anything outside of a particular region. And all these exist outside of any particular region. I suppose that's the idea. Yeah, I'm not the one that writes these questions. I would write them differently. Some services that are self-managed.
C2.
EC2, self-managed. All right. 3. That surprise you? No. It's serverless, but you still need to manage it. That's the idea there. Okay. CloudWatch, kind of the same idea. Which of the remaining services are regional? Again, majority of services are regional. DynamoDB is, Spectre is, Glue is. Which of the remaining services are used at the edge? CloudFront, Route 53, Shield. You could fit these last 3. They're all regional if you wanted to put it that way. The majority of services are actually regional, even those top 3 are actually regional. But we're talking, those ones specifically are self-managed. If we look at compute services specifically, what are the 5 categories of EC2 instances? The different families, right? Remember that we have a lot of different instance types depending on, again, the region. So they're divided up into particular kind of families or groups or categories. Right? So one of them being general purpose, what are the other ones?
High compute performance.
General compute memory, storage.
Storage optimized, accelerated compute. Right. General purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, accelerated computing, and storage optimized. So those are the 5 different main categories anyway. And then again, within those, there's lots of divisions as well. But if you just kind of remember those general families, you're good. Okay. So if you've been notified that a group of EC2 instances are experiencing random spikes of traffic, what is the most effective way to optimize these instances?
Balance, elastic load balancer.
Elastic load balancer?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, auto.
Not auto load balancer. Well, that's there is an ALB, but that is application load balancer.
Oh, okay.
It's a little different, yeah. The EC2 instances themselves have a lot of random spikes in traffic. Adding them to an auto-scaling group is the first thing that you would do. The ELB is not wrong necessarily because it would help distribute the traffic evenly amongst the EC2 instances, which in turn would help kind of balance out, the load between all of them. But what you do first is actually add them to an auto-scaling group, right? So that again, the idea is that you would be able to grow and shrink the number of EC2 instances. I'm not crazy about this question either. So probably would not be an exam question because it's not very clear what they're actually going. So thinking about the different kinds of compute that we have and what you would use different situations. If you had a situation like this where you had a simple script and it only lasts on average 5 minutes and cost is a huge concern.
AWS Lambda?
Yeah, AWS.
Yeah, this would be a good use case for Lambda, right? What about if we need to host a complex data analytics application on EC2? What instance type is best?
Complex.
Accelerated compute.
No, store.
Three choices basically there.
Store optimized.
Data analytics application on EC2. Between these three?
ECS?
Storage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, between the three different EC2 instance types. I would argue this one as well. I would say accelerated compute instance probably.
Accelerated is more
my
graphic,
choice,
so.
right? I think you would need a little bit more in that question because it depends where the data is actually being stored. In a lot of cases, the data is actually stored off of the compute itself, and the compute is completely separate than the data storage.
If it's a graphic, it would be accelerated.
So it's a little bit iffy. I would probably say accelerated compute because doing the data analytics processes themselves take a lot of compute. But maybe you are actually having to host that storage locally. So yeah. Okay, but storage optimized instance is the right answer in this case. Okay. But if you need to deploy an application running in Docker,
ECS.
you don't have there's only one answer for this one. How about this one? As a developer, you need to store temporary data that is removed when the instance is rebooted.
Yes.
As a developer, EBS.
Oh, it's EBS.
EBS. because
Temporary data
ECT instance store?
I didn't even see that one.
that will be removed when the instance is rebooted.
EBS, you can do
Yeah,
that.
that's instant store, right?
Oh, instant, yeah. Okay.
EBS is permanent storage,
Okay.
right? So think EBS is where you essentially create virtual hard drives. That is permanent. Instant store is more like a RAM drive that once you shut off the instance or terminate the instance, all the data is wiped.
EC2 instance.
Okay. What type of storage is instant store?
And then
Remember, we have 3 types. This is an extra question for bonus marks. Okay.
Jump power storage.
I'll tell you the 3 types. There's file storage, object storage, and block storage.
Block storage.
Which one is instant store?
Block storage.
file
Is
is
instant store file storage, object storage, or block storage?
it's a sort of file.
It's not far.
It's not really file.
This is an extra question.
It's object.
It's block storage, right?
Because it's an EC2.
Because you're connecting it to an EC2 instance direct.
Hmm.
So it's just a special type of block storage, not like an actual EBS volume. This is block storage that runs in memory. Okay, just so you know.
You also said EBS is like permanent, right?
Yes, it's persistent storage.
Persistent.
Yeah. It's permanent as long as you don't delete the EBS volume. Suppose, yeah. Okay, database services. Do we get another break here? I don't know if there's one built in, but I'll give you guys one in a minute. Can anybody just list some database services? Aura, DynamoDB, RDS.
Redshift.
CP said MySQL and Postgres. I wouldn't call those AWS database services. Those are actual database engines, which you can run on a database service.
Is it Mace?
DynamoDB is
Yeah, I heard DynamoDB, I heard RDS, I heard Aurora. Any other ones that you can think of? I mean, those are the most common ones you probably hear of.
The journal one for
Yeah, there's QLDB, there's Neptune.
Neptune.
What's Redshift again? As far as databases go, what kind of database is Redshift?
Big data.
Warehouse.
Data warehouse, yeah. Is DynamoDB a relational or non-relational database?
Relationals.
Relational, yep. Awesome. RDS, does anybody know the engine choices you have with RDS?
MySQL,
Relational database.
PostScript, SQL.
They got three of them.
Yeah, so SQL Server, I think I heard Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle as well. Hey, Neptune is a graphing database,
What
yeah.
about that memory DB? I don't know if I have it.
Pardon?
Memory DB? That one. That is,
DynamoDB?
no, the memory.
MemoryDB?
It's used.
MemoryDB is essentially, it uses Redis technology. It's essentially a non-relational database that runs in memory. So extremely fast. But it still is an actual full-fledged database. Yeah. Redis is an open source technology. We use Redis for our caching service, Elasticache, as well. But MemoryDB uses Redis. It uses a slightly different version of Redis that allows you to actually run it as a full-featured database in memory. So it's pretty cool. DynamoDB, again, I think we're all pretty familiar with it, right? It is our most popular non-relational database. Again, you may see the term NoSQL. It kind of gives me the chills every time I see NoSQL and SQL databases because it's technically not accurate. It's fine. What services support in-memory data storage? There's two big ones that we talk about with in-memory data storage when it comes to things like databases.
Warehouses.
Both of them were just mentioned.
EBS and EFS.
What's that?
The EBS and EFS.
No?
The warehouses.
Memory DB for Regis.
And DynamoDB.
Somebody said online Elasticache and MemoryDB, right? In-memory data storage. Okay. Instance store, almost, right? Because like I said, it's in-memory block storage. I would say, to be more accurate, what AWS database support services support in-memory data storage. That would be a little bit more accurate. That would be Elasticache and MemoryDB because both of them are essentially non-relational databases within memory. So yeah, MemoryDB for Redis is more as if you were using it as a standalone database. Elasticache is caching in front of another database, typically a relational database. Let's match the following items and then you get a break. I was going to give you a break, but yeah, it's actually. So, analytical database engine. More accurately, I would say data warehouse engine.
Redshift.
Yeah. The reason analytical database engine is fine, it works, is because very often it is used as in data analytics, but not exclusively. So if I was to say this, I would say a warehouse engine because that's actually what it is. What about relational database management service?
RDS.
Relational database management service.
RDS. Number 4.
Yeah. Non-relational database management engine.
Number 2.
Okay. Highly available relational database engine.
Aurora.
Not to say that other databases that you run on RDS are necessarily not highly available, but by design, Aurora is highly available.
Is it because it's their own, they build it?
It's a
Well,
managed
what it
service.
is that by default, it creates 6 copies when you create a database, and you can have up to 15 replicas as well, which makes it extremely available. Okay? You can create clusters and replicas and other things with other database engines, but by default, Aurora is. What about a fully managed database cache and data store? Awesome, right? Cache is the key word there. Database migration service. Whoa, that's a tough one, right?
It's a tough one. It's getting tough.
What does DMS stand for again?
Integrated migration service.
There you go, right? And a caching service for DynamoDB is right? Yeah, even if you didn't know that, it stands for Dynamo Accelerator, essentially, is what it is. And like, to me, it's insane because DynamoDB itself, you're looking at millisecond latency, like response times. That gives you single digit millisecond into the microsecond range, which is just insane. Guess what? You get another break.
Let's do it.
10 minutes. I'm going to give you 12 minutes again. It's so much easier just to make it to 25 instead of 23. Okay? Off we go. Stretch your legs, get some more coffee. We're almost done. Somebody online just asked me to explain the principle of caching. The idea is that when you cache something, you would cache responses from a database that were common, and in a lot of cases as well that maybe would really hit your database hard. So instead of actually going to the database and doing the actual query, you can just grab the result from a cache. Okay. Thanks, Elva. But that's the basic idea, just to improve performance, essentially.
How you feeling about this test?
Good to hear.
I know.
You said you're gonna take a Friday?
I think I might. See what the point of waiting.
Yeah, I didn't even know you could take a Friday, so that helps.
I think so. You can double check for almost certain. You get up to 2 tries, right, for the tests, the exams?
Yeah, you have more than that actually, but you have to wait longer each time, essentially. Yeah.
But you don't have to pay for it. You have to pay after the second
You
time.
have to pay.
But I think you get 2 for free.
Oh, 2 for, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I think they're doing that now. Yeah. Sometimes we run like promotions and things like that, but I think for the cloud practitioner,
I think
yeah.
the promotion is over. Is it still on?
I'm honestly not sure. I could double check, but yeah.
Oh, please.
And then based off that photo,
So,
with the NAT gateways,
yeah,
you can have one that's not a private, in case you want your stuff to talk. Oh, can't get back in.
I would not get back in.
Yeah, you might want it to talk out to the internet to do something, but you don't want anything to be there.
Yeah, but still you would only, in order for the NAT gateway to be able to connect out to the internet, it has to be in a public subnet.
Okay.
Because because the routing table still comes into effect, right? And in order for a subnet to have access out to the internet, it has to have an entry in the routing table that would connect to the internet gateway.
That connects out there, but then it restricts anything coming back in.
The NAT gateway does that anyway.
That's what was weird about that question.
I know, right? Because the whole point is that the NAT gateway has to have a public IP address, right? And it has to be able to reach out to the internet. So you can't do that if it's in a private subnet.
You'd still need a NAT gateway if you have 2 different private subnets, for one to talk to another. You need a NAT gateway in between.
No, you don't. No, you don't need a NAT gateway because by default, any subnet within the same VPC can talk to each other. You don't need a NAT gateway to do that. It's part of the routing table. right? The default entry in a routing table is to
The
say,
answer was saying within the same VPC, and within the same VPC could have multiple subnets.
right, but you don't need a NAT gateway for them to talk.
Yeah, you do.
No, you don't.
If you have like a 10.0.0 something, 11 something, how do you have a 10?
You can't do that in a VPC though.
If you have different subnets?
All the subnets have to be within the range of the VPC, or else they're going to be in a different subnet or a different VPC. We're talking about traffic within a VPC, right? When you create a VPC, you have a range of IP addresses for the VPC. Every resource, no matter what subnet they're in, has to be part of that address, okay? That address range. What you would do when you create the subnets is they would have groups of IP addresses, but they all have to be within the main group, okay, of IP address ranges, okay? So to put it simply, let's just say a few addresses. Let's say I created a VPC and it had a range of 10.0.0.1/24. Okay, that basically gives you 256 addresses. Okay, and I created a whole bunch of subnets within this VPC. I can't create a subnet that is even 10.1.0.0 because it's not part of this particular range. I can only create 10.0.0.1. I mean, again, a terrible example, but it would have to be 10.0.0.1 something, right? So normally what I would do is you probably have .16. This would give you 65,536 IP addresses. Then within the VPC, and this would be 0, then I would have 10.0.0.1/24, 10.0.0.2/24, 3/24, right, and so on. All of these are within this range. Okay, so when you create a VPC, you're going to have route tables all get assigned to each VPC, but the default entry in all of these would be if the destination is anywhere within this range, the target is local. Okay, that means that any of these by default can communicate with each other. Now, if I create another VPC, and this has a completely different range, 10.1.0.0/16, I have to peer these together in order for anything to talk to each other. And once I do that, again, then I have to add an entry to the routing table to say, if the destination is 10.1.0.0/16, then the traffic goes to whatever that peering connection is. Okay? And then again, from there, then it's going to hit another routing table and then go to the actual subnet, right? So the idea is that if you want to make a subnet public, you have to add in the routing table, you have to say, okay, well, anything that is not within those ranges, I want you to send to the internet gateway. That makes that subnet public. Okay, so that's why if I attached it to this, then I'd have my internet gateway right on here. So my traffic would then go out through the internet gateway and out to the big bad world, right? If I added another entry that said to here into a NAT gateway, and I attached that to a private, then the traffic would go through the NAT gateway, which would be in a public subnet. Then the traffic in turn would be routed out through that internet gateway. So my traffic would go from here to the NAT gateway and out. Okay? What I'm trying to figure out is why that diagram would show a NAT gateway and a private. Because the only way that a NAT gateway can actually reach out to an internet gateway is if it has a public IP address, and the routing table says any IP, any traffic outside of the local goes out through the internet gateway. That's the only way that it knows how to route that traffic, right? There might be something that I'm not getting, I'm not sure though, or seems to me like it's a mistake. I've never seen that before.
So you need like software updates. You need
Software
to figure it out,
updates?
but
So-
not necessarily.
Right. So if I had an EC2 instance here and I needed a software update, okay? So it needed to reach out to a server 24.16.125.32. Well, my routing table says, well, it's not local and it doesn't need to go to that peering connection. This wouldn't be here, right? So I'm going to send that to the NAT gateway, right? So it's going to send it to the NAT gateway, which exists in this subnet. The NAT gateway in turn is going to send it out through the internet gateway, which in turn goes out to the internet. That opens up a tunnel, okay? So now I've established a connection to this IP address, which means that this server can now actually respond. But what it's going to do is it's going to respond to the NAT gateway's public IP address, okay? Because the NAT gateway replaces the private IP address with the public IP address. And then when the server responds and sends it back to the NAT gateway says, oh, I know who that's really intended for, and then forwards it on to the private IP address.
So
That's how a NAT gateway works.
it's translator, right? It's basically translating the IP address.
That's what NAT stands for, is Network Address Translator.
So
Yeah.
putting it in a public is what you don't like.
No, you have to put it in a public.
The public.
Putting it in a private is what I don't
In the
like.
gateway, right? Yeah, yeah, that's what you want, right?
This is what's bothering me. So I think it's a mistake, but I'm not a network engineer. So,
That's how it works.
but I'm not a network engineer, so there could be a reason for it that I don't know. I don't know everything. I'm trying, but I don't know everything.
It's too much to know.
It's too much to learn.
It's my ultimate goal in life, before I die, is to know everything about everything.
Impossible.
Says who?
That's too much. It's too much to remember.
Doesn't mean it's impossible.
Big goals, big goals.
It's big goal, you gotta have big goals, right? Can anybody prove that it's not possible?
No, not yet.
Every dead person I
I'm waiting to get proof.
It's pretty accurate.
to be honest, I haven't come across a dead person that has learned everything yet, but you know. So to me, it's possible. Are you done for the day? Okay.
No, I'm still. I feel.
I don't want to
it's forget that you mentioned it.
My life would be boring.
Sure. All right, thanks a lot. Okay, sorry, somebody posted, or Elvira posted, private instances, private subnets can connect to other VPCs on your premises network through a NAT gateway. You can route traffic from the NAT gateway through a transit gateway or virtual private gateway. You cannot associate lots of IP with a private NAT gateway. You can attach an internet gateway to a VPC with a private NAT gateway, but if you route traffic from the private NAT gateway to the internet gateway, the internet gateway drops the traffic.
Yeah, JP, it's when you want to connect to other VPCs, but you don't want to route through the internet gateway. I think that is the scenario where you can bring in the NAT gateway and use it with the virtual private gateway. So I think that is what the slide was trying to explain.
Why wouldn't you just do it with a peering connection and then route the traffic through the peering connection?
The same question that I had, like we'll use VPC peering to do that, right?
Yeah.
That would be a good solution to connect to other VPCs and not the NAT gateway and routing it through the VPG as well. So.
Okay. Is this the way you explained it? Is that your explanation or did you copy and paste that from somewhere?
This is from the AWS official website.
Can you put in the link?
Link, yeah. Let me just drop the link.
peering free? Like if you had a peering attacher, would you not pay for anything that goes through that?
So, just so everybody's aware, this is, and I haven't read this, but this is where Elvira got it from. So if you want, just look up docs and NAT gateways, but I guess, yeah, there's a use case for it. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. I'm gonna look at this later on and see why you would possibly use this versus just a peering connection. But yeah, so anyway, so the slide wasn't wrong. I was wrong. It happens. I was wrong once before this. I thought I made a mistake, but I actually didn't, right? So I was wrong about making a mistake, but that's happened. Don't tell my wife. I think she actually said, we've been married for like 20 years, something like that. I think actually she said twice to me I was right. I should have had a t-shirt made. I really should have. But yeah. No, when it comes to that, my philosophy as a husband is you can either be right or you can be happy. You can't be both. So at work, I need to be right, or I'm supposed to be right. At home, I'd rather be happy, right? So just leave it at that. Yeah. Elvira agrees with me, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't bother arguing. What's the point? Just gets me in deeper trouble, even if I'm right. Explain that to my son, and he's 17. Yeah, I'll remember that. It's a lot of things you've got to remember. A lot of things you've got to learn. I didn't set a timer. I think we're over the time, so let's carry on. Let me get you guys out of here. Question 3 to V was, why do you need a NAT, or why would you use a NAT gateway in a private subnet? Again, I think we've beaten that one to death, but if you're more interested, you can reach out, grab this link. Okay. So, default and custom VPCs, right? Again, with the VPC, they are regional. Okay. You can have one VPC region. Locally, you're going to have more. And again, within the VPC, then you would create at least one subnet. Again, typically, you're going to have more for various different reasons. This is also showing the routing table, showing the default entry for the routing table, and considered local traffic for anything that falls within the range of the VPC. If you're doing anything beyond that, if you want to get out to the internet, then it needs to go out through the internet gateway. Okay. There is a limit of 4, but it's a soft limit. Okay. A soft limit means you can increase it. You can just ask to increase the limit, put in a support ticket. For some things, there is a hard limit. A lot of things are soft limits. It's basically, again, it kind of goes back to the idea that it's very easy to create resources in AWS, and it's easy to create things and forget about them. So they kind of will put a limit on some of the things. Okay. So let's say we need to patch several EC2 instances that are in a private subnet. This is exactly the discussion that we just had, right? What you will need is a NAT gateway. Okay. And again, the idea here is that private instances would go through the NAT gateway. And here again, they're showing it in a private subnet. So I guess this is how you could do it. Using a VPN connection would be one way of doing that, right? Yeah, it's really funny that this is coming up here, Elvira, because in all my courses that I teach, this has never come up, ironically. Maybe it's in the advanced networking, but that's one I don't teach. But in all the other courses that I teach about networking and advanced networking, it's never come up. So I think that's why it's a bit surprising to me. Okay, but hey, I learned something today, which is awesome. I love when I'm wrong or I don't know something because I love learning stuff. Actually, that's one of the best parts of my job.
The first part.
What are the two types of VPC endpoints? Sorry, one wants me to go back a slide. Okay. So again, you're going to have your VPC in a region of different subnets. One of the things that maybe I'll point out is that a VPC can span multiple availability zones, but a subnet needs to be contained fully within a particular availability zone. Sorry, we're just getting a little bit low on time, and I just want to make sure I get through all of this as well. The two different VPC endpoints that you can create, gateway endpoints and interface endpoints, depending on your situation. Storage services, next. Again, what are the three different types of storage services?
Object,
File,
file, block.
Object, file,
blocks.
and block storage, yep. Okay. So remember those three types and when you would use them. So let's say we're setting up a shared file store that can be used with EC2 instances, EKS clusters, and on-prem systems. What service would you use? File store?
No. So this is home block.
That's EFS, right? EFS allows you to create network folders or shared folders that you can attach to multiple EC2 instances or on-prem or clusters, okay? There's also a service called a storage gateway. I guess this is on the exam. It wasn't on when I took it, but that was a long, long time ago. This allows you, the way this essentially works is it is a physical device that you would have in your corporate data center, and you would be able to attach it to local services that you would have. And there's three different types. There's the file gateway, the volume gateway, and the tape gateway. A file gateway essentially emulates a file server. Volume gateway allows you to attach a iSCSI attachment to another server. That server will just see it as a kind of a drive. And the tape gateway actually emulates a virtual tape library. But what's actually happening on the background is that AWS storage is actually talking to a service in a cloud where you would be backing up all of that stuff. Okay? But to the local devices, it looks like a local device.
What about the FSX file gateway?
Yeah, same idea, right? This is just a different type of file gateway, either S3 or FSX. It just depends on what you're actually attaching it to in the backend in the cloud. When it comes to S3 storage classes, which one should you use if you're unsure of the access pattern? All right, so if the access pattern is varied.
Intelligent.
What did you say?
Intelligent.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Oh, the tiering. Yeah. Intelligent tiering. Yes. All right. I don't know why correct responses could include intelligent tiering is the right answer.
Okay, so that's the.
Yeah. AI and ML. It's everything now, right? So we talked about this a little bit. Can anybody name some analytics services?
SageMaker.
SageMaker, yeah. That is
AI?
That's AI. Yeah, I wouldn't really call that data analytics. That's more AI. This isn't something that we really talk about a lot, or not in the parts that I taught anyway. But these would be some of the services that you'd use for data analytics. Some common AI technology that we hear about a lot is things like translate, forecast, and recognition. ML services, that's SageMaker,
Yeah.
Code Whisperer, right? ML is machine learning, right? Building the actual logic models that AI uses. Right? What I talk about a lot though is just remember if you're thinking about a career getting into IT and you're kind of thinking about where you should go. AI is great, ML is great. Obviously, there's a lot going into this. Bless you. Just keep in mind that none of this is going to work without good data. Right? Data analytics is actually really, really important as well. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out really applies in AI, and especially because if you don't train them well with good data, it's not going to work. How about this scenario? You need to provide business intelligence reports and dashboards to your management. Data for these reports exist in CSV files, RDS, and EFS. Which AWS service should you choose? You need to provide reports and dashboards to your management.
Redshift.
CloudWatch? That's what you said? Oh, no. That's for monitoring metrics, things like that. Can't do it with data like
Redshift or
this.
something.
CloudTrail?
One of these.
Oh,
Sorry.
Not data.
How would you actually present the data? Again, I don't know if we didn't talk about these in our parts anyway, but it's something that you should know about. QuickSight. QuickSight is the way that you can visualize data, right, and create those dashboards and things like that. Yeah.
I will never forget that.
QuickSight. Yeah, we use it internally a lot. I don't know if that was a laugh or a cough, but thank you for that. Which of the following services can help you stream data using Apache Kafka? MSK. MSK is managing streaming for Apache Kafka. It's specifically built for Kafka. I can see why you use site Kinesis. Kinesis is typically data streaming. This is specifically asking about Kafka though, and that's it. Application services is next, right? Talking about application integration services, business application services, developer tools, front-end tools, IoT services. I know we definitely talked about these, what services can be used to handle messaging and notifications for your cloud-based applications.
SNS.
I heard SNS. What's the other big part?
QS.
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 Can anybody tell me the fundamental differences between the two?
Yeah, Q.
Well, they're both used for decoupling. Explain to me some fundamental features of SNS.
Emailing to.
Is it a pull or a push model? It's a push model. Yeah. Is it sub-hub model or a producer and consumer model?
Producer and consumer. Like subscriber, right? You send it out to your subscribers.
Isn't that what pub sub is? Publish and
I have no idea
subscribe?
what that. Oh.
Publisher and subscriber. Right? So push is out, right? Is it a one-to-one system or a one-to-many system? One-to-many, right? So again, think of SNS like you're subscribing to a newsletter. If I subscribe to a newsletter being the topic, I'm not only going to get that message, but anybody that subscribes to that is going to get the same message. Whereas SQS is a pull model or pull. I have to go and check the queue to see if there's a message for me. And it's a one-to-one idea, right? Once I process a message, we typically, anyway, don't want anybody else to process the same message. So think about an ordering system in a restaurant, right? That kind of idea. You don't necessarily want the same order to be made for the same table over and over and over again. You only want to pay for this. Right? So those are kind of the fundamental differences, okay? We have some other notification alerting services like EventBridge, but SNS and SQF are the two main messaging services that we talk about. Which service can we use to identify sensitive data in an S3 bucket using a little bit of intelligence? Anybody know the service that we use for that? Your last name is not Ray. Ace.
Oh, yeah, for sensitive data, okay.
You know, it'd be really cool if it actually inspected your buckets and looked at the data and then wrote songs about it. That would probably violate a lot of rules, so. How about this one? Your company is beginning to use IoT devices in their facilities. They are looking for an AWS solution that can run at the edge. What service would you recommend? And we have a lot of IoT services. In this case, we're talking about Greengrass. This is an open source edge runtime service. All right, another exam question. Company wants a dedicated private connection to the AWS cloud from its on-prem operations. Which AWS service or feature would provide this?
Right there.
Dedicated private connection. There really should be only thing that pops into your mind, right? Yeah, you guys are right. Direct connect, right? Yeah. Exactly. Which aspect of AWS infrastructure provides global deployment of compute and storage? Okay, again, you're going to get
Storage.
but just kind of think about it before you see the answers, right? Global deployment of compute and storage. Again, we're talking about the AWS infrastructure itself. Would this be multiple availability zones in a region, regions, tags, or resource groups? Yeah, the idea being global deployment, right? So yeah, multiple AWS regions. Okay.
They're very tricky.
And then let's quickly go through the last module, okay. Billing and costs, right? Again, what are the compute pricing models that you're aware of?
Reserve.
Spotted ones,
Reserve.
on demand. What else?
Reserve.
Reserved instances, savings plans, yeah. Those are all correct answers. Let's say we have an application that consumes 10,000 IOPS on average and requires block storage volume. What would be the lowest cost service that will meet that requirement? Pretty specific. First of all, what service would we use to create a block storage volume? That's EBS, right?
Yes.
So start there, and then remember the different types of EBS volumes that we could create. In this case, we're talking about IOPS, okay? So this is where we would use a throughput optimized HDD.
Yes.
Throughput optimized. Yeah. Wait.
Or like the time.
You get general purpose. Yeah, the EBS throughput optimized HDD only supports the maximum. The correct response is EBS standard SDD. EBS standard SDD supports up to 6. Yeah. Okay. Why? Should be EBS general purpose.
Is it cheaper? The other one's cheaper?
Yeah.
Because the one is SSD, one is hard. Might be cheaper to use the.
It
would also meet the requirement. Meet the same requirements?
It doesn't meet the requirements. You have an opportunity to 10,000 on average required block storage volume. The lowest cost service that will meet.
SSD is more
It doesn't meet the
expensive.
requirement.
But the SSD is more expensive because it's accessible. And
Yeah, but throughput optimized Does it hit 10,000 IOPS? Elvira, I don't know, maybe you can clarify on that one, but I don't think that's correct.
I think it's just based on what the learner mentioned in class, that SSD is more expensive. That's why they went for
Yeah, I think that's what they
HDD.
raised.
Yeah, but does a throughput optimized hard drive go up to 10,000 IOPS? In fact, even the notes say the incorrect response includes EBS throughput optimized HDD because it only supports 500 IOPS. So that's wrong. Double check that, okay, you guys? Right. Then we talked about dedicated compute options, dedicated instances versus dedicated hosts. Right. Difference being that with a dedicated instance, you're guaranteed to only have your accounts, EC2 instances running on a particular host, but that host can change. Whereas a dedicated host, the host will not change.
Okay.
Difference there. Resources for billing, budget, and cost management. What services or features are you aware of that can help you understand billing and manage your accounts? Again, just think about some services that have to do with billing, managing your accounts.
Pricing calculators. Budgets.
Budgets,
For.
yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? Even things like auto scaling they have in here, right? Because that can help manage your costs. Okay, it's a little bit iffy. They're not being so specific.
That's,
Again, this is just a general, very general question. It wouldn't be an exam question. What tool can you use to estimate the cost of launching an EMR data processing solution?
Pricing calculator.
Yeah, it's the pricing calculator, right? Which of the following is a benefit of using a managed service?
Cost optimization.
Again, you'll get a list, but basically in this particular list, it would be reducing operational overhead, which essentially is optimizing your costs. Things to think about when you're migrating data and transfer costs definitely come into play. All right. General way that I think about this, and again, this doesn't apply in every specific situation, but generally, you do not pay for data in, you only pay for data out in most situations, okay? Don't say that for everything in every particular situation. I kind of think of it like a bank. A bank will take all your money for free, no problem, right? Oh, well, we'll take all your money for free. Yeah, sure. But then you're like, okay, I want to use my money. Oh, wait, you want to use your own money? We didn't ever think you'd want to use your own money. Okay, well, you can, but we're going to charge you to withdraw that money, right? Well, but it's my own money. Yeah, but we didn't think we were going to actually want to use it. We were using it. Kind of that same idea. I know I'm being a little bit cynical, but you know. Sorry, Uncle Jeff. You're not listening really, are you? Elvira's taking notes and she's going to tell on me. Still here so far. Trying to get. What support plan offers consultative architectural reviews? Somebody actually had an interesting question when we brought this up because there's two. One of them that you get one a year, one of them is unlimited.
Enterprise, over enterprise, or that.
Yeah, ramp and enterprise. What support plans only offer some trusted advisor checks?
business.
Business.
Some.
Only offer some. The free
Enterprise.
Develop. Technically developer and basic, right? The way I remember it is to get the full featured of trusted advisor checks, it's business and up.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's the way I remember the other way.
Some, it says some, okay, that's why.
Okay. So that's why. So basic and developer, really, They just didn't include basic. Basic is not a paid support plan. I guess you could look at that. Again, like I said in my class, you don't necessarily have to memorize this entire slide. I would memorize the key differences. Those are the kind of questions that you're going to get. Right? So let's go through another couple questions here before we end. Company must meet compliance and software licensing requirements that state a workload must be hosted on a physical server. Which EC2 instance pricing will meet these requirements? And we basically just talked about those. Would it be dedicated host instances, spot instances, or reserved instances?
Dedicated host.
Dedicated host or dedicated instance?
Dedicated host.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, because again, dedicated instances, the host can change, and that's a big difference. What is the advantage of consolidated billing on AWS?
Discounts.
Yeah.
So spent money.
That's an easy way to only have one person die from a heart attack when they see the bill. Yeah, volume pricing, possibly anyway, right, in some situations. Okay. That's it. All right. Again, I will be marking attendance, right, for everybody, so you will get an email. We didn't do it yet for this class, right? In that email is feedback link. Please do the feedback link. Please, please, please. I didn't bring anything to bribe you guys with, but I'd love to. I will do the survey for you if you want me to. Really good at it. No, you will. There are just a few questions, right? Some of them are for me directly. Some of them are about the course. Basically, 5 out of 5 means we did our job. Other than that, I would only ask if, you know, if anything to me in particular as well, maybe just make a suggestion of what I could do differently, right, to earn that 5 out of 5. I really appreciate that, right? Again, you will be getting lots of material. The hands-on labs session is also good to go to. Instructors are available to help as you learn. Oh, I love how they just volunteer us, right? No, honestly, I put up my email address and you can look for me on LinkedIn as well. Up on the board, I'll put it in the chat as well. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I will accept your LinkedIn invite, right? No problem. And you can ask me questions, right? Anything you want, and I will respond. Maybe not at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'll respond as soon as I can. All right. Lots of other self-paced learning options as well. Okay, so
Come on, any
Skill Builder is really good. Skill Builder is great. Has a lot of resources for you to use. Okay. I think somebody wanted this particular slide as well. This is really good as well. Okay. So yeah, that's basically it. Again, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Elvira as well. I'll give everybody Elvira's personal phone number as well, so they can reach out to her. You don't mind, right, Elvira?
Oh, really? Then I'll just share yours as well.
You don't mind. Do you? Damn. You can probably find it. That's fine. I ignore my phone anyway, so it doesn't matter. I never answer it. No, awesome. Thanks for your help, Elvira. Really appreciate it. Thanks for making me look bad when we were talking about NAT gateway in private.
I was learning as well, JP. I was
Yeah.
learning the process.
It's just weird that I've never come across that before. So yeah, we learn too, like we're constantly learning. Things are changing all the time. We come across things. I can't tell you how many times I've talked about NAT gateways and I've never come across that situation. So it's really cool, right? And actually it's one of my favorite parts of this job. So awesome. All right, all. Enjoy your evening. Good luck on your cloud journey. It's definitely.
Thank you.
Glad you all came out today.
Thank
All
you.
right, have a good night.
It's so good.
Thanks everybody online as well. Thanks for coming out. Virtually anytime. I think so. I think doing labs is probably the best way to actually learn. Getting your hands on. Yeah. We're actually doing a session tonight. I know, but we do other sessions.
I would register for tonight, but
Yeah.
I would register for now.
I would, if you have the chance to do it, I would do it. Yeah. for sure. Yeah.
I mean, what about this from practice? What some of the questions they were most detailed.
Yeah.
I have to wait. And after some of they have in AWS.
Yeah. Go to Skill Builder. There's a lot on there. Yeah. Yeah. There's other third-party sites that have some too, but they're third-party sites. Like Wiz Labs, a Cloud Guru, they're good ones, but they're paid as well.
Yeah, and so.
Yeah. But they're pretty decent ones. Yeah.
JP, can you still hear me?
Sorry, 1 second.
They have a storage mostly. Are they thinking they're useful?
If you're going to be doing that a lot, then yeah, definitely. But this one is a little more general. I would say the next one to take, if you're going to be getting more into AWS, if you want to go up to the associate level, would be the solutions architecting one.
Associate.
Yeah. But
That one is, I think you guys also, if I want to take that one's a paid for.
it's paid in 3 days.
Paid in 3 days.
Yeah.
If they do it here, live,
No, they don't do that here.
online,
Online or and some other center.
then that's the plan. Then
Yeah.
we just finish the.
But I do it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Do this one
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
then we finish this.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, man.
Will you give these slides in the post-class material?
Yeah, I'll be sending you some information afterwards. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. One more is like, I want to end up at the data engineering
Okay.
certification. So
Yeah.
do I just go from here to the data engineering certification?
Sure. Yeah, you can. You can do any of the certifications in any order you want. You can even do the pro right away if you want to, but I wouldn't recommend it. You could go right to the data engineering one. I haven't really had a chance to really dive deep into it and really look at it. I haven't taken it yet myself. It's very new. It just came out in April. I just haven't had time to take it. Before that one, I often recommend taking the solutions architecture anyway, just because it's a really good general foundational course for everything in AWS. There's no reason why you can't just do the data engineer one though as well. It will talk about some general things, but obviously more specific to being a data engineer. So yeah, in general, I recommend going down that route now. I think it's a great route to go down, right? Data analytics, data engineer, that idea. It's where everything is basically going. So yeah, everybody's talking about AI and ML, but like I said, without good data, it's kind of useless. So depends what end of the spectrum you want to be on. So yeah, there's no reason why you can't. Look at the, what I would do is look at the data engineer, like the actual exam. It'll give you kind of breakdown what's on the exam. And if you feel like that's all that you really need, but if you want to do the solutions architect, kind of get a more of a general feel for AWS, but maybe it's too broad. Maybe you don't need all that kind of stuff. So look at both of them and see what you think. But they're both about the same level.
Yeah. Background, educational background.
So then you might be fine. Yeah. Yeah. All right, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
It was a good class.
Good. Somebody online, I think they wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, it's me. Kendall,
Yeah.
how's it going? So,
Good. What's up?
well, I heard your answer to the one other person you were talking to about sending the material later, so that I guess we have an opportunity to look at the slides that we saw today.
Yeah.
And the so I don't have to ask that question. The second question I had was that if I had an issue with I was able to do all of my classes. I did the 3 classes ahead of taking this one. I did the other cloud practitioner classes. And my VPC lab, for some reason, wasn't coming out right. I didn't know if that was the sort of thing that I could reach out to you or someone else about.
That's fair.
Wasn't coming out right?
That's fair.
The instructions say that that when you first create the VPC, you're supposed to have 4 subnet entries that are there all the time, and then the other 4 that are created for the coffee shop.
My class just ended the next class.
And I never get the coffee shop subnets, which makes it hard to kind of do the rest of the project. I don't know what I'm missing. I've done it twice.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There must be something that you're missing, or maybe something isn't done right. With the instructions for these labs, they're a little bit different than what I'm used to. Does it give, or maybe Elvira can help, is there any kind of link or anything that it says to reach out for help if you have any issues?
My instructor for that class I actually took that class out of the over from Seattle, and my instructor for that was Jarrell Tate. But I do not have a Amazon email address for that guy.
Okay.
Because I would reach out to him directly if I could, but I don't.
Okay. Why don't you reach out to me, email me, I'll see what I can do.
Okay. I'll do that.
Did I put my email address in the chat window? I think I did.
Yes, you did. Hold on 1 second. I'm sure I copied it down. It was jpschramm@amazon.com.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, so reach out to me and I'll see what I can do. I'm not that familiar with these particular labs, but yeah, I'll have a look.
I appreciate it.
I can't promise you anything, but I'll have a look. Okay.
I mean, if you're open to sending me Mr. Jarrell Tate's email, I don't know if that's something you have access to, but if you're open to that, I would also do that too. He's the one who actually instructed that class.
Yeah, no problem sending it to me. Yeah, I'll see what I can do to help you out. If I have to reach out to somebody else, I will. But yeah, just email me and then I'll handle it from there.
I appreciate it. All right.
Yeah, no worries. Okay.
I enjoyed the class. Thanks.
Good. All right. Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Are you teaching a labs class after this?
I am not. Somebody else is. Yeah.
Do you know if it's in here?
What's that?
Do you know if the class is in here?
I don't know for sure. I'd have to double check the schedule. Did you register for it?
I did.
Did it tell you which room it's in?
Oh, just come in here and they told me at the front desk.
You're probably gonna have to check in anyway at the front desk. So.
Oh, okay.
Probably the best thing to do is just go to the front desk and ask them. You can leave your stuff here if you want to.
Okay.
And then you can move it if you need to, but